So, welcome everybody to the November 19th City of Port Council meeting. Can we please have the roll call?
Mayor Brooke.
Present.
Deputy Mayor Dexter. Here. Councilmember French.
Here.
Councilmember Kidd.
Here.
Councilmember Meredith.
Here.
Councilmember Shirley.
Here.
Manager West.
Present.
Attorney Blair.
Here.
Thank you all. Let's rise and for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We are going to begin the meeting with some thoughts about Jim Ryan, who passed away this last weekend. Just to acknowledge the family is here and welcome and our condolences to all of you. And so at this point, I would like to just let council begin speaking. So I don't know, would you like to?
Well, we're missing Jim Moran tonight very much.
We are too.
So sorry. But talk about a life fully lived. This man was busy every minute, every day, and he was everywhere. Now, there's a rumor he was twins because you ran into him everywhere you went. And at every meeting, he was there, and seems like he was on every board. But Jim loved our community, and thank you, Bree and Jim, for moving to Port Angeles in 2008, because you chose this as your hometown. I was born here, and I'm happy I was born here, but you chose it. And boy, you guys jumped in with both feet. And Jim has the heart of a volunteer, he always has. And he volunteered so many wonderful places. And so many of us got to know him through that and know you through that. And so he's just really made Port Angeles a much better place. So thank you for sharing Jim with us, because we're all so much better off because of it.
I agree with Sherry. Thank you for, that's a huge commitment on his part. And, I used to see Jim at the football games announcing. He'd always, even though you were halfway down, he'd always yell out. And I'd always kind of forget he was up there at the top of the stands. I don't know how he even saw that well up there. And again, at the volleyball games at the high school also. And, I had to speak with him after our last meeting on Tuesday night. It is an unfortunate reminder that you never know when that time will be here. And a great guy to talk to, just a fountain of information. And I was reading through all the volunteering that he does, which was far surpassed what I was even aware of. And just a heck of a guy to go out there and do that. But I will miss Jim the most from having a view down here. When somebody would start speaking, the man could give the most amazing faces. And you'd have one face when you started, and then as you got partway down, you'd be looking at you and just thinking, I take it you don't like what that was said? Or he'd be nodding his head or whatever. And but it was great. The camera's always there, and he's always looking here, so sometimes when I watch it on TV, you could never see his face, but his expressions were priceless, and I will truly miss the opportunity to see that. So thank you.
That reminded me, as you were saying that often it's true with Jim, you could see the point of order on his face before it actually came out of his mouth. Some of you may have read in the paper, I think I wasn't as articulate as I could have been, but I really, really appreciate Jim's kindness. And, the last meeting was really difficult, and we had a really lovely conversation afterward, and I just am so grateful that he took the time to call me and that I took the time to call him back. And I think, even if people don't agree on things, that's to me, was such a good example of how we should be doing things. We can disagree, but we can still treat each other with kindness. And I just really appreciated that about him. And I got to enjoy the Veterans Day ceremony with him as well, so that was nice. We sat next to each other. The other thing I was thinking about, just from a council perspective for me, is often I would be here and he would come in and we were the only people in the room at the time, and he always had this "good evening," and we made a joke about, we had to keep saying it that way because one day he said it and we kind of joked about, oh, it's a little like Hitchcock. So we would just keep doing that. That was our usual hello, so I will definitely miss that. And appreciate, of course, as was already said, how much he really did for our community.
I really enjoyed 3 years that I had knowing Jim. I think he talked me into going in a dunk tank when I was a council candidate at this thing over at the, I don't think I would have gone in if it wasn't for Jim. And I grew up on that block where you live, and so I have a lot of memories of that block. And I know Bill's house is Geraldine's house, because it was right behind the house I was born in. One of the stories I liked that Jim told was about one of his volunteer activities. As people mentioned, many volunteer activities. And this is driving the lighthouse keepers out to the end of Dungeness Spit, where they would stay for a week and then he'd drive back out, or somebody else would drive back out and pick them up. And because you have to do that at low tide, that would be done at all hours of day or night. And so Jim loved sharing about these times being out in that amazing place, driving down this beach, making sure there weren't any beach logs that you were about to hit, delivering these people out to this lighthouse, really just your way out there in the middle of the strait. And, maybe the sun is rising and you're behind Mount Baker, and you look around and there's mountains everywhere and there's water everywhere. And Jim loved this place and he loved sharing his exuberance for it, and it helped me to say, oh yeah, this is a really nice place, like let's look up and look around. And so I'll think of him when I think of Dungeness Spit and the lighthouse out there, and these other places that he felt were really magical in our community. So yeah, I'll miss him fondly. Thank you.
So those are some really great thoughts from the rest of the council, and it covered a lot of those characteristics of Jim that we all appreciated. The one that I really think, we kind of alluded to is he had a really great sense of humor. And he also had a quip or a joke or a little one-liner. One of my favorites that the rest of the council might not have ever heard is right after the Pledge of Allegiance, most meetings, you could hear Jim mumble, "play ball." And I always really liked that. He always just was a really, and even when we had, like Kate said, we had some contentious discussions and council meetings, he still had that sense of humor. He still was really kind and really funny, and I really appreciated that. And then, the other thing that gets me is, I was born and raised here too. My dad was raised here. My grandpa spent most of his adult life here. And Jim still knew more about the history of Port Angeles than I ever had. And I don't know how he did that, but he really did jump into this community with a full head of steam and got vested and got involved and really came to love this community, and I think this community really loved him, so thank you.
And usually on, I guess once a month, I would meet with Jim at the senior center just to talk to the seniors, to try to connect with everybody. So I really, really missed him today. So I got a chance to talk to a lot of folks out there. And I said, tell me some of the things about Jim. And here's what they said. He said, one, that he touched many, many lives. I don't think we will be aware of how many lives he touched, but because of all his volunteering, he really touched a ton of lives. And there was a lot of folks that were really upset of hearing it. They were just dumbfounded about how, the fact that he's gone, but it also helped them remind all of us that are here that every day counts. And so that, they were just really aware of that. One person said it was just so hard to put the words, this feeling of loss for them, and surprised how much they felt this loss. Another person said he was just a consummate gentleman, and what a great listener he was, and he was such a nice man and always had a smile for everyone. Another person said he was fantastic. He always volunteered for everything and was such an active person in the community. He hated to give up his the seat at the Senior Center Board because he now served at the Council. But that was what he said. And then there was two stories that came up. He said that they usually drove the Senior Center van to the Emerald Downs, and he would usually take a boat trip or so. But apparently one time he took you with him, and he was going to meet his children there. And he, what this one woman remembers, she goes, he was so proud of his grandchildren. He was just he just talked so much about how much he loved them. And so she remembers that he was just beaming about his grandchildren. Another one was a trip to Bellingham to go see the fall colors. And apparently it had been a long day, and it's been driving and sightseeing. And the one thing that people were really impressed is how much he'd done the research about every bit on the trip heading out there. But so they ended up missing the ferry that everyone would get to. And finally, when they get to the ferry, folks get up and go up to the upper part. But he stayed with the bus, and there was just two other folks that stayed with him. And so they got a chance to chat. And he said it was real connection. The conversation was a real connection, and they just remember being able to share their lives together with him, and that he was such personable openness and sharing that created a very touching memory for these people. So, like I said, he's touched a lot of people in a lot of ways. So, and I too personally want to say thank you for sharing Jim with us. We really miss him, and to know that this community is thinking of you, and that our hearts are with you. So thank you.
Madam Mayor, if appropriate, I'd like to add some comments from city staff as well. I think it's really important that on behalf of city staff, we want to express our appreciation for Councilmember Jim Moran. Jim was an amazing person to all of us, extremely supportive of city staff, and we're all extremely saddened by the loss of Jim. And it's important that as we're thinking about tonight's meeting, I can tell you with certainty that Jim greatly looked forward to tonight's meeting because Jim was in his element. Tonight we're discussing the city budget. And I think many of us know that Jim spent hours on his Hawaii vacation tabbing that budget, coming up with well-informed questions for Serena and myself, and worked really hard. And I know he looked forward to this meeting. I think too, it's good to share just some of the fun that I had. And if you think too what Jim was good at and the financial aspects of everything, I think every 2 weeks I typically meet with most of the council members, and I had a bi-weekly meeting with Jim as well, where we met every 2 weeks. And at that meeting, his favorite thing to do, from my perspective, was to walk through the city's expenditure report that made it in the council packet. And we would spend quite a bit of time doing that every meeting we had. I know Jim loved doing that. He enjoyed pointing things out to staff that perhaps we didn't catch. And it was a really fun time for me to be able to do that with Jim. But over the years, I think all of us have had different engagements with Jim, even before he was on council. I think most of staff were engaged with Jim at the various nonprofits that he volunteered for. We heard about his vision for the Lincoln School with his work with the Historical Society. We heard about some of the trips that he took in the senior center van. I think most of us as city staff had the opportunity to actually ride along with Jim on some field trip of some sort in that van, and it was quite special. What I want to highlight most, and I think many have shared, the magnitude of different community giving experience that Jim provided, whether it was volunteering or as a board. what I want to say is every single time you saw Jim acting in those experiences, he did so with pride and passion towards our community, towards those events, and towards those organizations. And that's what we're going to remember, and we greatly appreciate the time and service that Jim dedicated to the city. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to the public comment, and I'm going to pull out the names that are going to talk about Jim. So I guess there's just Bill Atkins.
Good evening. My name's Bill Atkinson. I live in Port Angeles on 4th Street. And Joe and I were neighbors, and we were close neighbors. We worked together on projects. We cooked together. We used to put on parties. Jim named it the 4th on 4th Street, you know. And so we had a dynamite time. Shared a lot of holidays together. It was just always a delightful time. And we supported each other. We would do things for each other. I think one of my outboard motors is over in their place. And their pressure washer was in my garage for a long time. So we were good friends. We worked together. And the interesting thing to me is that our politics was different. You know, to say the least. We had a different view of government. But we were still friends, and we could respect each other. And because you have differing views with somebody doesn't mean you gotta hate them like the stupidity that's going on in our country now. But Jim was a delight. I'm glad I knew him. Thanks.
Thank you. Marilyn Ash?
Okay, I have two different things I was going to talk about. So could I talk about Jim and then come back up later and talk about the other thing?
Yes.
Would that be okay? Okay, I'm Marilyn Ash, and I'm from Compassion, Clallam County. And I just have a really strong thank you to your family for the amount of volunteering that Jim did. And if you ever want to learn how to be compassionate with a wide range of people, go and volunteer, because you're going to have, and the stuff that he did the senior center, cultural events, sporting events, keeping things running here. And I know what it's like when someone in your family is always gone because they're always volunteering. So he added so much to our community, and I just want to thank Jim also for his kind words that Kate talked about in the Port Angeles paper, that even after that contentious meeting, that he could go beyond that and reach out with kindness. And so, and my heart just goes out with you, with just the sudden shock of it all. Thanks.
Thank you. I think that's the last person that signed up to speak about Jim. And is there anybody else in the audience who would like to take the time right now to do that? And if not, I thought I'd let you know that we'll go on to city business if you...
And we're going to leave, but we thank you for this opportunity. We were here when he started.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We will then begin the public comment from Tom. Anya Samowitz.
Just really briefly, I just wanted to come and thank you guys in person. The contract that we got through the Parks and Recreation Department was already approved, and this is just a reapproval with some legalities, but just wanted to come in person and say thank yous. And we're so excited to have started the school this fall, and the kids are loving it, and we just hope it grows and grows and grows. So thank you.
Could you please state your name for the record and whether you live in the city or not?
Yes, my name is Anya Samwitz, and I live in the city of Peninsula.
Wonderful, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. April Bellamy.
Bellamy, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Don't forget to state your name.
Hello, I'm April Bellamy. I'm here from the Credential Downtown Association, and I just wanted to remind everyone that Christmas is coming. And we have the tree lighting event downtown on November 30th. It'll start at 3:30 on Laurel Street between First and Front, and we're going to have Peninsula Jazz Singers and Studio 360 dancers and the Hamilton School Choir before the tree lighting. And tree lighting in Santa will be right around 5 o'clock. So everybody come down, we're going to have hot chocolate and cookies, and it should be a lot of fun.
Thank you. Cole Walsh.
Good evening, my name is Cole Walsh, and I'm a resident of the city of Port Angeles. I'm also a senior at the Port Angeles High School. I'm here tonight to share with you some of the things that our high school Deka Club is doing at the high school and in the community. I would like to begin, first of all, I really wanted to send out my deepest condolences to the Moran family, but they left. So I serve as the Vice President of Marketing for the Port Angeles High School Deka Chapter, and on behalf of our club, I would like to thank Councilmember Moran for his work at the high school. He did volleyball games and football games, and also his volunteerism in the community. Currently, our Deka chapter is working on assembling baskets filled with everything needed for Thanksgiving dinners. This year, we are providing 51 Thanksgiving meals to families from our elementary schools, and this is the largest number we've really attempted, so we're excited about that this year. The Deka Club is also one of the largest clubs at the high school with 132 high school members. And this week is the Deka Week, which is where members participate in cool events we have throughout the entire week. And we're seeing some fun and creative participation. We look forward to achieving more in the community and at the high school, and we thank you for supporting our high school and our club through the actions you do as City Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Jane Montgomery.
I'm the mother of Nina Marie Napion, and I have a heart. Anyway, my heart is Jim Moran was her mentor, and I only had a few months knowing him, and he impacted my life, as everybody knows here that have had decades with him. I just have only a few months, and I don't have a lot of people high on the pedestal other than my dad, but he was right alongside them. And my heart goes out to his family, and he was all in for my daughter, running for City Council number 6, and yeah, he just was all in. And I just have to I'm not a public speaker other than my daughter, she isn't, but she stepped up to the plate, and anyway, it was because of Jim, and he gave everything. He gave his whole heart, and we all know that, yeah, he's an angel, and my heart goes out to his family, and anyway, anyway, he did. He stepped up to the plate for my daughter, and like I said, it was all in. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Anyway.
Could you state your name? And
Janie Montgomery.
And whether you live in the city or not?
I live in the city.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Jane Vanderhoof.
Good job, thank you.
Thank you for all being here tonight, and I'm Jane Vanderhoof, and I live in the city. I'm here, apparently you're going to be talking about the budget tonight, and I was reading in the Peninsula Daily News that our utility rates are supposed to be increasing by, I think it mentioned like a minor amount, and I did try today to find out what that minor amount would be, but I haven't succeeded in getting a call back or finding it on the website. But the reason I want to talk about this is because the Bonneville Power Administration, who administers the power from the dams, is in a huge amount of debt. The debt service is $200 million, was $15 billion, and they spend $200 million a year to service the lower Snake River dams. There's 4 dams on the lower Snake River, and the Chinook salmon are dying because of those dams. And the southern resident orcas feed on those Chinook, and they are also dying. There's only like about 70 or so left. And so we're trying to see, it would be much less expensive for the taxpayers who are now supporting this huge amount of money to service the dams, which are very old. And because solar energy has become 70% cheaper in the last 10 years, it makes much more sense to segue into that and to finally get rid of the dams. And so I'm hoping that Jim Waddell, who was a civil engineer with the Army Corps of Engineers, spoke to you a couple of months ago about this issue, and we are really getting ripped off in our electric rates. And I have the data here on a graph, which I don't understand very well because I don't do finances, but I will give it to you, and perhaps we can continue to review this issue. And it's I have a farm in Joyce where I used to live, and now I live in the city, and when I moved here, I couldn't believe how much more money I was paying for water and the power and the sewer. And I don't know how especially low-income people can continue to afford that if the rates are going to continue to go up, especially when we're servicing something that should be decommissioned. So thanks for your future looking into this. Thanks.
Thank you. Marilyn Esch.
Hi, I'm Marilyn Esch, and I live in the city. And I'm speaking for myself, but also for Compassion Clown County, which, yay, we did pass the charter, the Port Angeles Charter for Compassion a few months ago. So I said my heart went out to Jim. My heart actually goes out to all of you and all the staff for your sudden loss. I keep looking over there for Jim, and he's not there. It feels really weird. But also for all of you who were here for the last city council meeting. I was out of town, so I wasn't here, but I did listen to it. And I know it would be hard, and it was. And I walked through the woods while I was listening, because I wanted to be in a place of feeling compassion for each of the people that were speaking and sending just kind of positive thoughts. And thank you, Kate, for trying to set a tone of respect and trying to create a container that might help people express their feelings in a safe way. I really appreciate that. So I heard some genuine pain and hurt and anger from many of the veterans and their families. I also heard a couple of them acknowledge Ducey for taking the difficult agenda item off the agenda and for apologizing for any hurt that caused. And thank you, Sissy, for your compassion and courage and just sitting there and being present and listening to people. I don't know if it made any of those who were genuinely hurting feel better when there was a vote to take away Sissy's role as mayor. Maybe it did, maybe temporarily. But to me it was shocking. And it also made me feel sad and confused. To me it said that the citizens' feelings and comments were not enough. It felt political and punishing when I think what was needed after that cathartic 90 minutes was some way of healing as a community. I think that good governance and leadership can provide an effective container for conflict and strong emotion. Thank you, Kate, for trying to set that example. My request is that everyone on this council and the new council learn more about conflict resolution. I certainly don't want there to be a norm of trying to remove a mayor if they make a mistake or express an unpopular view. I do commend all of you for coming back after the break and for going on with a really professional way of being. I'm going to read one more paragraph. We have a charter of compassion for Port Angeles. Compassion isn't just a feeling, it's a skill set. Being able to create an environment where strong disagreements and emotions can be expressed without blaming, shaming, or punishing is part of that skill set. It's really a heavy lift on the steep learning curve. It's okay to make mistakes in that learning process, but I do ask you to step up the learning on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan Schottenhofer?
Schottenhofer. Young lady was asking about utility rates. It's 5% per year for the next 5 years.
Madam Mayor, if I may just share that that is not correct information. Staff would be more than happy to sit down and walk any member of the public through the PowerPoint presentation we provided in this room relative to utility rates. I believe there was an article on a different utility provider within the area that had those types of increases that are being mentioned, but that is not the approach that council arrived at relative to city utilities.
And could you please state your name and whether you live in the city, please?
Dan Schottenhofer, 214 Olive Drive, Port Angeles, Washington. I also own a business, Snowbusters, which I don't advertise much after last year. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dan Schottenhofer, Chairman of Citizens for Affordable Schools. Tonight you'll hear a presentation by Superintendent Marty Brewer extolling the virtues of the proposed $52 million school levy, a 175% local levy tax increase. If approved, it would be the largest tax increase in the history on the citizens of Port Angeles School District, larger than the failed $98 million bond and the failed $47 million levy because it is only paid for in 5 years. There appears to be no formal resolution on the agenda for the council to support or oppose this proposed $52 million levy. Only a Port Angeles School District presentation. A formal resolution is necessary as citizens would need to be informed ahead of time to be able to speak for or against such a resolution. In the interest of transparency, fair play, and openness, I formally ask the Port Angeles City Council for equal time in the near future before any resolution is voted upon to present information opposing the Port Angeles School District capital levy. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's all that I have signed up to speak. If there's anybody else who would like to, thank you.
My name is Bill Atkinson, live on 4th Street, Port Angeles, again. There's an item on the agenda tonight, and it's got to do with, if I can get my electronic gadget here. It's called the Peninsula Housing Authority Loan Amendment. And I read that, and I read it a couple of times, and I didn't see, and effectively, as I understand it, it's to delay payment to Port Angeles from the Housing Authority for 6 months on the notes. But I can't find anywhere in there where there's consideration for granting that delay in funds. And in the contract world that I lived in, you don't get a free lunch. If you give up something, you get something in return. So I want to point out that if you're giving them a pass on just being late, that's not, I think, in the fiduciary interest of the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. My name is Mike Doherty, live at 617 South B. And I'd just like to say thanks for your action last week in adopting a resolution and draft of the climate action plan. As a county commissioner under appointment from Governor Law and Governor Gregoire, I served on 4 statewide committees that looked at different problems with climate change that were coming. And that was quite a ways back. It was very clear to the state that almost every aspect of our economy was going to be influenced. So for years I've become kind of a student on this topic, and after leaving office I still keep an oar in the water and try to volunteer as a citizen. 2 weeks ago I was meeting with DNR, and they're studying strategies for their department to become more resilient to climate change, admitting that it's coming, and so much of it is baked into our system. In our lifetime we'll still be dealing with it. Last week I was at a conference on coastal carbon forestry, because a lot of our future is going to be involved in sinking more carbon on behalf of grandchildren and children. So part of the lessons that I learned was to keep being an active reader leader, and I hope you'll do the same. And even those that are leaving council, if you might review the 2-county study, Jefferson and Powell together, your own city staff participated in those 2 days of workshops. There are a number of strategies and remedies that the city can take to help eliminate, or at least try to adapt for the changes that are coming. A number of things that involve your budget, since you're going to talk about the budget tonight, you now will be in compliance with the governor's request of the major funding boards, Public Works Trust Funds, Centennial Clean Water Fund, all of those. They will ask you the question, what's your progress on the climate action plan? And now you can say yes, and you get a few extra points when they make the decision. They don't tell you how many points because they make the decision later, but they ask you that question on the record. Secondly, I hope you'll provide some regional leadership and get the other cities involved in the city, Jefferson County, and they are already redoing their 2006 or 7 plan at both the city and Jefferson County level. So by doing that, you have a better chance of getting state grants. We got 160,000 or so that did the first 2-county study. Plus you're standardizing, hopefully, the protocols you'll use, and so for the state to roll up the information on both impacts, mitigation, adaptation, it makes it an easier task. And if you have citizens involved, they'll be able to help the staff much more. If you need another primer on the fiscal impacts, last week you may have read that the federal bank in New York issued a report because they're so concerned about risk management that we now have basically wasted about $800 billion because we're not working fast enough to mitigate the impacts of climate change. So the quicker we can start addressing these baked-in impacts, the sooner we can get back on a sound fiscal footing. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. So with that, anyone else coming up, we will move, Council, since it's time for our public hearing, we'll move directly to the public hearing, which is Ordinance Levy 2019 Property Tax Collection in 2020.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So tonight we have the second reading of the ordinance for the 2020 property tax levy. Since the first reading, there have been a couple of minor changes. We received certified assessed values from the county, as well as other additional information from the county. And so it resulted in a couple minor changes. So recall from the presentation on November 6th, as the assessed value changes, so does our levy rate. So our estimation of $2.27 changed to $2.30 based on the assessed values. And then there was a change to the total amount that we are allowed to levy, and so that's been included in the ordinance as well, about $500. And you'll notice that there's also the resolution that was approved is coming back to you with that amendment to the total dollar amount, and that's so that we can take that full 1% that declares our intent to the county when we include that in there. And so with that, I'm available for any questions before the continuation of the public hearing.
So do we have any questions? Seeing none, this is, we're opening the public hearing, continuing the public hearing on this item. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to speak to this? All right, seeing none, let me read the ordinance. An ordinance of the City of Port Angeles, Washington, levying regular ad valorem property taxes for collection in the fiscal year 2020 and directing the city clerk to certify said amount to the Board of Clallam County Commissioners.
Did you close the public hearing? Did we close the public hearing?
No, I guess we will close the public hearing since there doesn't seem to be anybody who wants to speak to this.
I move that we amend the resolution authorizing the tax increase of 1% or $46,437.49 to reflect the change in the amount of 1% collection.
All right, and a second on it? So let's amend the resolution.
Okay. Second.
Any discussion on that? All right, seeing none. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously.
And then we have to actually adopt the ordinance, right? So I move that we adopt the ordinance as read, levying property tax book for collection in 2020 as read. Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, so we will do our...
Pass the resolution. They have to pass the resolution. Right? We have an ordinance and a
I
resolution.
believe you just did pass the
Okay,
amended
sorry.
resolution.
That's okay.
I'm mostly here.
Okay, so now we will move on to our second public hearing, which is the 2020 budget.
Madam Mayor and Council, while Director Carrizosa is setting up the presentation for you this evening, I did want to make a few opening remarks regarding budget. Council, we are very happy to be presenting you with the balanced budget for 2020. It's important to share that due to years of Council policy and decision-making, Council has enabled the city to attain an excellent financial foundation for years to come. Council's commitment to attain no new debt and pay off existing debt has resulted in responsible fund balances and a mindset that looks towards our future and not just the needs of today. Investment in capital projects and infrastructure now demonstrates taking care of what we have without waiting for emergencies or failures of systems. The review of utility budgets and rate structures that went into the creation of this budget also acknowledges a dedication to respect what ratepayers can afford. I'm very grateful to each of the departments and especially the finance department that worked so diligently to provide the balanced budget before you tonight. At this time, I want to encourage Council to watch the presentation from Ms. Carrizosa. I think you'll find it very informative as far as this year's balanced budget. And after the presentation, we want to make sure Council takes the opportunity to ask any questions they have at this first reading relative to the 2020 budget. Thank you.
Okay, good evening again. So I'm just going to briefly go over how we balance the 2020 budget and then move into some of the numbers, just a high-level overview, and we'll move into the public hearing for the 2020 budget. So the budget process starts in spring, and some of the things that we do in spring include looking at budget goals with council, looking at the CFP, prioritizing, starts on the staff level, looking at personnel, and then we start building our budgets and move on from there. And so the budget is really developed around these council policies and the direction that we receive at those work sessions, as well as in the strategic planning with CFP. And
For this year, there have been several briefings and public hearings on the 2020 budget. They include the budget goals work session that occurred on June 18th. The revenue sources, public hearing and presentation that was on October 15th. Budget work session that was on October 22nd. And then we had the first public hearing on the property tax collection on November 6th with the continuation that just occurred tonight. And so there's a lot of things that we could highlight in the budget, a lot of stuff that's in there, but I just want to do just some highlights of some of the more bigger items or things that are a little bit different from 2019, just to go over really quickly. So the 2020 budget is sustainably balanced without any reduction to core services, and it is balanced at $127,391,600, and that includes $18.6 million in capital expenditures. There is some use of reserves, but those are only for one-time project or capital-related items. There are only use of reserves to sustain the budget. So the 2020 budget also pays off our LTGO bond for the Gateway Center and reduces the C debt. So that's that balloon payment that's going to be occurring in 2021. So the 2020 budget actually takes care of that agreement. In the 2020 budget, we've included a code enforcement program that includes 2 part-time code enforcement officers that will be in the police department. We have dedicated funds towards council prioritized capital projects, and that's projects that were in the CFP as they're prioritized, as well as in the strategic plan. And we've increased capital transfers, not just for utilities for capital, but also to the street fund as well, to prevent the use of reserves within the street department. And we set our utility rates using the methods that were approved by Council and the Utility Advisory Committee as we went through the methodologies for the cost of service analysis, starting in spring of this year all the way until fall. So there have been a couple changes, or a few changes, since we looked at the 2020 preliminary budget. Our revenues have increased $1,600, and that's really the result of the certified information we received from the county. So that's a little bit of additional that we were allowed to take there. And our expenditures have increased $2,498,900. So the reason for that is capital projects and one-time projects that will be moving from 19 into 20. So these are unfinished items at the end of 2019, and we're moving into 2020. So you can see primarily they're capital projects. That's the start of the list. But there's a couple of reasons why we do that, why we go ahead and move them into 2020 at the end of the year, rather than waiting for the budget amendment. And the first is that gives the authority for spending on January 1st, rather than waiting until spring when the budget amendment comes through. And then the second is it's a net effect to our fund balances. And so we are not putting something in and then asking for it to be removed. So we can just make that a clean transfer if we pull right out of 19 and into 20 at the end of the year. And so you see that, like I said, primarily capital projects, but there's also the replacement for services for that truck that will be moving into 2020 as well. Okay, so I'm going to move right into looking at some of the tables and charts. We're going to look a little bit familiar with the 2020 budget, and we're going to start with all funds, looking at revenues and expenditures. So I'm just briefly going to go through each line or each category there and explain what the differences are from 2019 to 2020. So starting with taxes, you'll see an increase of about $500,000. Those are the taxes that you primarily see in the general fund: sales tax, property tax, and utility taxes. And so that's the increase that we're expecting for 2020 for those. In licenses and permits, we're expecting a little bit of a decrease in the revenues, and that's because of the large one-time projects we had in 2019 that we're not expecting in 2020. And then intergovernmental revenue, we're expecting some decreases there as well, citywide, and that's due to grants. So we had some grants for capital projects that we're not expecting in 2020. Charges for goods and services are increasing about $5.2 million, and that's in the electric funds, and that's charges for services primarily due to this expected startup date for McKinley Mall. Looking at our miscellaneous revenue, our $2.8 million, that's for the NPS settlements, or National Park Services, for the LWA facility. So there's about $2.5 million in the federal government budget right now that we are expecting. And then property trust income, that's really capital. So that's our capital increase for transfers and also for equipment replacements, the transfers into the equipment services fund. And then finally, in other financing sources, you'll see about a $2.5 million decrease for revenues, and that's related to the Light Ops building transfer that won't be occurring in 2020. Okay, so just looking at just 2020, you can see our citywide revenues. Primarily, come from charges for goods and services, and you can see the breakdown right here by utility, with electric by far being the largest for charges for goods and services, and then taxes making up about 12% of the revenues citywide. So looking at all funds for the expenditures, you'll see increases in several categories. I'm just going to highlight a few of them. So we have supplies, and that's our BPA power purchase. So as our charges for services for the McKinley Mill go up, so do our charges from BPA for the electricity. In our other services and charges, we have a few changes, and one is our waste connections contract. We are expecting some increases there. We're also expecting increases to our medical premiums and our liability insurance, as well as to taxes. So looking at the next category for intergovernmental or interfund services, those are really our capital transfers, and that's for, again, the Lighthouse building, the decrease there. Correspondingly, the increase in the capital outlay is also $6.4 million for the start of the project. So we have a decrease with transfer out into capital, but an increase for the actual spending for that building. And then, let's see. And then our designated for reserves, you'll see that's also going down. And again, that's because of the transfers for capital. Okay, so what this looks like, just for 2020, you can see the interfund services I've broken down so you can see where those go. Primarily those are capital in nature, and those again are transfers. And then in our other services, you can see citywide professional services, medical and benefit premiums, and taxes make up about half of that category. Okay, so looking at our fund balances and our fiscal health for the city, I've included all the major funds here. The items that are, or the line that is in this kind of light orange color, that's the amount of either the fund balance or the cash balance that's required. The teal color is the current unassigned fund or cash balance. And then the line here, this dotted light blue line, is the target. So that's in our policies, that's where we say that fund balance needs to be. And the little diamond shapes are where the current fund balance will be as of the end of 2020. So we projected out to include the budget. So you'll see the general fund is going to be right on target for where they need to be. That's 25% fund balance. The street fund's a little bit under that 25%, but the good news here is at the end of 2018, the street fund was at 6% fund balance, and for the end of 2020, we're expecting it to be at 17%. So we're making a positive change in the right direction. So lodging tax, the fund balance is a little bit high. That's primarily, and the lodging tax expenditures are primarily capital, and so that's not too concerning. As it goes through the advisory board, we'll expect to see some of that fund balance be used. PenCom is right where it should be, and due to larger than expected revenues for a real estate excise tax, that fund balance is quite high. Electric is where it would be expected to be, and water is a little high because of the National Park Service settlements. So the two that we've received in the last couple of years are really driving that increase. So wastewater, solid waste are both pretty much right where they should be. And stormwater is maybe a little high, but that has to do with capital. So we'll expect to see some spending coming from there. And then Medic 1 is actually quite a bit lower than what we would like to see. However, in the 2020 budget, we haven't built in anything for this, and the reason why is our GDMT revenue, the new revenue that we had for 2019, is coming in considerably higher than we anticipated. So we do expect excess revenues that will go right into that and should bring that fund balance up to that 25% threshold. Okay, so I'm just going to talk about the general fund, and again, this is the general fund is where you would expect to see those general city services, so police, fire, finance, legal, city manager's office. And so the general fund is balanced at $21,573,100, and this does include the use of $1,054,400 from 2018 savings. And so that use of reserves is only for one-time capital or project-related items. There is not used to sustainably balance the general fund in any way. And what that does is it takes the general fund balance from being about 31 to 32%, and we're bringing it to the 25%. So we're using that excess amount of reserves for capital, or we're reinvesting into our infrastructure. And so what this looks like in the general fund Again, for revenues, we're seeing a pretty large increase in our taxes, primarily for sales and utility. Our property tax is limited to about 1%. And then again, the decrease for the large projects for permitting. And then for charges and goods and services, that's really allocations. So those are charges that the general fund charges to other utilities or other departments for services that they provide. And then in our other financing sources, that's an increase for our facade grants. That's a transfer in. Okay, so a lot different from our citywide revenue outlook. Taxes make up the largest source of revenue in the general fund as compared to charges for goods and services. Okay, so looking at our general fund expenditures, we are expecting an increase in salaries and wages, and $62,000 of that increase is for code enforcement. So those are for those officers in the police department that we'll be hiring. So I did want to note that. And then in our other services and charges, we have a couple things in there. We have $150,000 as a placeholder for our code updates, and that's pending the work session that will be occurring on the 26th. So right now it is just a placeholder. Should council decide that we will not be moving forward with that, then it will be reallocated to another capital project as prioritized in the CFP. And then also in there is a capital increase for IT that's a transfer out. So in our intergovernmental and interfund services, those are the transfers that occur for our streets department, for capital, and also for debt. So the $350,000 that we're using for the balloon payment is coming from that section there. So that of that $608,000 increase, $350,000 of that is for that debt payoff. And then I did want to note that it does look like our fund balance is going down significantly, but again, that's just to bring us back down to 25%. We still have a very healthy fund balance. Okay, so this is the general fund expenditures. About 60%, a little over 60% of it is salaries and wages as well as personal benefits, so they're combined of the two. And then in our services and charges, professional services, equipment services, IT services, and our utilities, payments to the utilities for, say, solid waste, water, electric, general fund pays in for all of those that we use. Those make up the largest portion of our services and charges. And then in our intergovernmental, again, those are the transfers out. And so streets is the largest, as well as our contract with the county for jail services. Okay, so that's my high-level overview and highlights. I just did want to note that the 2020 budget is really carefully thought out and is a very collaborative process that occurs with citizens, staff, and council members. And it occurs over 9 months of the year, so it is quite a long process, and we do put a lot of time and work into it. I also want to note that the city is fiscally sound. Our fund balances are healthy. There's only a couple of places. The streets department is one of them, and we are working to build that up, and so we feel like we're in a good position. We have continued to reinvest in our capital projects, infrastructure, personnel, and our community. And our cost of service analysis that we have built and the methodologies that were approved have really helped us with our utilities and making sure that we're being fair and affordable to our citizens. So just a reminder for the budget schedule. Tonight we had the second reading and public hearing as well as the adoption of the ordinance for property tax levy. And we had the first reading of the ordinance and the public hearing for the 2020 budget. So on December 3rd, we will have the continuation of the public hearing as well as the second reading and hopefully the budget adoption at that time. Okay, so I'm available for questions regarding the 2020 budget. As Nathan mentioned, this is a good time to bring up anything that I may have concerns about or questions about or just want some clarification on prior to opening the public hearing.
Okay, Counsel, any questions?
Just really quick, I think the one bullet point that you missed in the fiscally sound part is that we are paying down our debt and we're just not accruing new debt.
Yes.
That's important to the council.
Yes. Okay. So I do have a question. So I was going through the budget book, and on page 196, we have the Generation 2 Dream Playground. And I was just trying to understand the numbers. So if you can help me understand the numbers, because it says that the total project was $425,000. It's page 196. And then it said the 2019 budget, we had $200,000, and then for the proposed 2020, we had $410,000. I just wasn't sure, I know that, I think this is one of those great projects for the city. I know that there were some funds that were being raised, and potentially other grants that we're going to go for, but I'd like to understand how much of these dollars that are listed here are from city funds that are going to go into the playground.
Okay, so I do apologize, you are correct. There was a last minute increase to that project and the project total wasn't updated. So the total project we're expecting to be around $575,000 to $600,000.
I'm going to jump in here real quick. So when we originally started this project with Generation 2, we were looking at a project around $400,000. And so when we started the process, we decided to go a little high and thinking that was going to be around $425,000. So we're still kind of in that range, anywhere between $425,000 and $475,000 as we go through the designs and we try to bring those costs down. The majority of the funds that we're asking through the REAP funding, which is $110,000, is really for the new surfacing that is going to be needed for the project. Because that was one of the biggest concerns for the community was surfacing. And so that alone is going to be around $200,000. The Dream Playground Foundation has about $125,000 already to invest in it. And we're asking for $110,000 to add to that from the city. And the rest of it will be going for grants, service clubs, and fundraising. So recently we just got $25,000 from the Quantify to go towards the project, and so we're really moving forward with the fundraising portion of it.
So I guess, where it says proposed 2020, $410,000, that's not the total project, and it's not the total that's coming out of our budget.
Correct.
Okay, and like I said, so we're only right now, from our budget is 110 that you're asking for.
Correct.
Is that was...
So that gives us a good seed money to start, about $235,000, and then from there we start fundraising for the rest of it, because starting in April we're going to start ordering equipment and start looking at demo and things like that. So, and on the December 3rd meeting, Steve Methner, the Dream Playground Foundation president, is going to come and do a presentation to the council.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I, except I'm okay with having the 110,000. It's just when you look at it here and it's 410, it's like, wait a minute, that's not what I thought we were going to do. So,
but that's also taking into consideration the extra funding that we're getting from community members, fundraising, and things like that. So it's not just city dollars; it's total money coming in.
Yeah, and I guess maybe for folks, because it is in our budget book. It's hard to know what is city funds and what are not city funds, especially if it's in our budget. So if there's any which way in the future to be able to clearly denote that, yes, the project may be a total of, $425,000, but that coming out of our budget is only going to be 110.
So I have not looked at that portion of the budget, how that looks, but when we do the CFP, we break that down, so it actually explains it a little easier. Where the funding is coming from and who is it coming from.
Right, though this is when we get to see it for the budget. So yeah, I realize the CFP is part of it as well. Okay.
And Madam Mayor, we can provide that breakdown to you prior to the next council meeting.
Yeah, no problem, thank you. Also, one of the things that I know this council talked about and was really wanting was to have that the bathrooms being addressed. And I know we're going to try to address some of these bathrooms with lodging tax funds potentially. I don't, right now we have $75,000 in the budget every year, right? For updating.
So last year was the first year of approval, so we have $150,000 going to replace our current restrooms that we're having. When we did a presentation earlier this year, we mentioned a pilot project, and we didn't get any direction from council on that. So I did submit a lodging tax application for $200,000 for that project.
Right, and I think maybe, I don't know if we meant to not give you guys direction about the pilot project, because I think it's something that we all discussed, but I think we all kind of felt it was a good thing, and I think maybe we just failed to vote on it. And so not giving true direction. And so I was wondering if potentially, so you're going to go through with the pilot project with the lodging tax, or is that not?
If it's approved by the Lodging Tax Committee, yes.
Okay, and I'm wondering, Council, as we decided that this was a really important issue, is what we have given for this year of just $75,000 for bathrooms, is that sufficient? Are we okay with that?
So the $75,000 that totals $150,000 will go towards the replacement of the Edis Hook restroom.
Right, but we have how many bathrooms that need? I mean, from what I understand, we're in dire need to get in our
So
bathrooms.
every 2 years, we will be replacing one of our existing restrooms.
And, right, so, and that'll be, to replace all the restrooms, we're talking 10 years?
Approximately, yes.
So are we okay with that timeframe?
Did we talk about it before, is it every year replacing a restroom? Has that changed, or do I misunderstand it?
So we get funding, $75,000 every year, but the cost of a new restroom is around $150,000.
And I don't remember us saying, don't go forward with the restrooms. I mean, when do we need to authorize?
So we are moving forward with the restroom replacement projects. What we didn't get extra funding for is the 24-hour restroom pilot project that we presented to the council.
Right, so I think, like I said, I think we all agreed about it, but I think we failed to say, okay, let's make a motion and say we agree. So I think what I'm saying, this is our budget, and we get a chance to say what's really important for us. Because I was surprised too. I was like, what do you mean we didn't move forward? I thought we had. But I think, like I said, we failed to give a vote on it, to be able to.
And really it came down to the vote of figuring out where the funding would come from. And so during the presentation, one of the things we did mention is that we would try and get lodging tax money for it.
Right, so that's one of the things to cover. Now, right now we're doing $75,000 per year, which only gets us half a bathroom. And so that's the reason it'll take us 2 years to get one bathroom replacement. Do we want to amend that and modify and add more funds to that? It's a question for the council.
As a city, we're doing the classic thing that many cities do, which is we spend a lot of time managing the impacts of not having public bathrooms open 24/7, and we're spending a lot of money doing that instead of going upstream and addressing the problem. So I really think we should go upstream and make sure that we have well-designed bathrooms open 24/7 that are accessible throughout the city. And I don't want to wait 10 years for that to happen. I'd like to prioritize this like the mayor suggested.
Well, that brings us to, as Corey mentioned, funding. And he is on a plan to replace them, but it depends on funding. So where would funding come to double the effort that the plan is currently doing? So.
It also needed to have a conversation with Director Hunter on his engineering workload as well as we continue to add capital projects as well.
And it also, people have to clean the restrooms, and that is a job I wouldn't want. And I'm amazed that we can hire people to do that because the public has left our downtown bathrooms sometimes in disarray. So there's added cost to personnel. If they're open 24/7, people use them inappropriately, and there's a cleaning cost. So we really have to factor in all the exact costs.
And I would agree with that, saying that there have been volunteers. There's been people who have said we'll volunteer to clean. So that's really great, and I think we should take them up on it.
Let's be clear too, when the farmer's market opens on Saturday morning, the volunteers at the farmer's market have to go around to the corners of the gateway and clean up bodily substances because the bathrooms were closed overnight. So we've designed bathrooms that are poorly designed and then need to be closed because they're attractants for other activities other than going to the bathroom. We as a city had a presentation, which I thought was very well done by Director Delicott, about other designs for bathrooms employing crime prevention through design, if you want the technical term for it. And that's what we're moving forward with, and I think that's the right direction. The question becomes, at what pace do we do that? If it's going to be 10 years before we replace 4 or 5 bathrooms, then let's get a plan in place for putting some Santa cans like Nia Bay does, like La Push does, and actually having public restrooms around. And this is a proxy war for what we do about homelessness in this community, because there's a number of people in this community who think that if we just make life hard for people, they'll leave. And that's not going upstream and addressing the roots of homelessness, which is the rent is too high. So, we're trying to address that, but in the meantime, we're dealing with the impact of homelessness. The bathrooms are one of the places where we're addressing that. But it's not just about that. It's also about people who go out for a walk, people who go out for a run, people who are out in our community, and making it accessible and easy for people to be pedestrians or bicyclists, take the kids to the park, and be there after the bathrooms are closed and be like, oh shoot, we can't hang out in the park any longer because somebody has to go to the bathroom. So let's make this community more accessible to the entire community by having a place where people can go.
Mike Meredith?
I think there's more to the subject than just dealing with this tonight. That's $150,000 didn't fall out of the sky. Mr. Hunter needs to figure out, Director Delicott said that, what the workload is for that. And I know that we've had some groups step up to volunteer for some things in the past. There's more involved in that with insurance issues through Mr. Bloor's office. And, if you use a restroom downtown, and come on folks, we're not at the Hilton. It's very obvious some of those restrooms are most likely outdated, and Corey's doing the best he can to update those things and get them moving. 1 every 2 years, I don't think that's horrible, but is there a time to discuss how all that works later on? Yes. Is that tonight? I realize this is a budget that we are dealing with, and this is something dealt within that, but I think there's more components that need to be brought forward to council to be able to make a decision on that rather than to make a decision tonight for moving forward on those restrooms. But when tourists come to town and visitors are here, yeah, we want clean restrooms that are used for that activity of those restrooms. And I think many of us have seen inappropriate uses of our restrooms in some of our park facilities, and they cannot be patrolled 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to make sure they're being used appropriately. And Mr. Delicott had a great presentation on some of the different options for dealing with that. And I saw some of them firsthand when I was on vacation, and they're out there.
Yeah, and I think, getting back to his presentation, it was a great presentation. I think we are agreed, but I don't think we gave him direction on which we need. So he's going to go ahead and do the lodging tax for the pilot project. I'm just thinking that because this is the only time that we get to speak about the budget and the numbers, that this is our chance to say, well, I guess there's also the capital facilities.
Yes, there is also the capital facilities plan in the spring, and if council wanted to bring this back even next year, discuss it and make a motion on it, we'll amend the budget to include what council would like.
Right. So that was, I think, where I think our misstep was, in the sense that we did want this, but we didn't give it a direction. So I just wanted to bring this back up to make sure that, I guess in the future or now, do we want to amend this or not?
A couple things come to mind. Number one, I think that the pilot project should be a high priority, and I appreciate going to lodging tax. I think that's an appropriate funding source. On Friday of this week, the Chamber of Commerce is going to be opening the Winter Ice Village for its second year. It stays open, I believe, until 9 PM most nights. It gets dark at 5 PM, and I believe the downtown restrooms are usually closed around then. We have a restroom literally across the street from it that is positioned in the alley, that is not very welcoming because of its positioning. And what I hear is we're gonna have to have 3 or 4 more winter ice villages before that restroom is replaced with something that could be on the street, that could be used, that could actually increase our capacity downtown. And if it's designed properly, if the pilot project is somewhat successful, and we find a design that could be open later, rather than 24 hours a day, then we wouldn't necessarily have to have all of the visitors at the Winter Ice Village use a Santa can. So I definitely think that bathroom is a priority for me, knowing what I know about economic development and downtown's needs. I understand why the Edis Hook bathroom is probably at the top of the priority list just based on its condition. And I don't have a problem with that being, the first one on the list. The downtown is probably second, I don't know. But, I just see, so we have last year and this year making the Edis Hook bathroom, and then 2021 and 2022 getting the funding for the next one. It's a long way away. It's a lot more winter ice villages before we get a functioning restroom across the street from it. So I would definitely want to make the point that that should be a priority, and we probably should plan for that ideally to happen sooner.
So do we want to entertain a motion that in the future, we're going to go ahead and modify this budget to find some more funds, or in the next CFP, we're going to, I'm just trying to see, how do we want to move forward on this?
Council, if I can offer some suggestions. So I think, one of the things I'm hearing that is extremely important, we've already heard this before, is making sure we have an opportunity for a 24-hour restroom in the downtown. Staff is moving forward with that relative to a lodging tax application. As you saw in the presentation tonight, there's a pretty substantial fund balance in there, and I'm very hopeful that there's a recognition of the tourism merit of actually having such a restroom in our downtown. And I feel pretty strongly that there likely will be a recognition of that. It's something that we have heard from the Visitor Center a great deal about, is the need for restrooms in the downtown. So I'm very hopeful that we see success in the Lodging Tax Committee relative to that item. If for some reason we don't, Council always has the opportunity to re-rack the capital facilities plan, to take a look at other items that we're funding in the capital facilities plan and say, you know what, these restrooms are more important. Let's reallocate the money away from some other projects and put them towards restrooms. So we absolutely can do that. Unfortunately, we may not know the answer relative to the Lodging Tax Committee prior to adoption of the budget. One thing I'm certain of, though, I do not want this issue to delay the adoption of the budget. So if it is a desire of the majority of Council to do something different than what has been presented to you, we absolutely would love to have an motion this evening that directs us differently.
Can I ask a point of clarification on, one, the timeline for the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee recommendation, and second, what are the other projects that the city has put in as applications to LTAC?
So I believe Council received a memo approximately 2 meetings ago that laid out each of those applications, but I believe another Council directive was to look at city pier railings to see if we could utilize lodging tax funds for those, but also to get the 24-hour restroom, and Director Delicott can remind me the other application.
So from the city standpoint, for Parks and Recreation, we have our tournament application that we do every year. We did a combination of the 24-hour restroom and the railing project, so we're going to need a few extra dollars that the council allocated $164,000. We're going to need a little bit more than that. So that is one application just for capital projects. And the other one, the Dream Playground Foundation put in for as well. That I'm aware of. Director Berkey may know more, but maybe not.
No, that's all we're planning on for our applications.
So months ago, and this is probably not a popular thing to say, but months ago I made the point that I didn't think the Dream Playground was a reasonable application to put before the Lodging Tax Committee. And I don't think the rest of the council agreed. I think that the RCW is fairly clear, and those monies should not be used for what I think is a community playground and not something that provides heads and beds for a hotel tax.
The other thing I'd like to add is that I know that the Lodging Tax Committee talked about how important it was to maintain what we have, and the zigzag and the stairs were, high on that priority list from that committee,
So, Madam Mayor, we have spent around, I think it was $30,000 to have Sergeant Engineering look at giving us 4 designs for Laurel Street stairs. We just got that information. The project's going to be anywhere from $200,000 to $400,000 depending on the design. While they were here, we also had them do a analysis of the zigzag stairs, and that came back yesterday. And I'm happy to report that structurally, it's in good shape. But to make the repairs necessary to make the improvements that need upgrades is going to be around $200,000. So when the CFP comes around next year, we'll update those dollar amounts and we'll move forward from there.
thank you for that update. That's great to know. All right, Council, how do you want to move forward?
I had another item I want to mention. So in the budget, traditionally, we have for years and years been a partner with the Clallam County EDC along with other cities and community partners. And I don't see funding for the EDC this year for going forward into 2020 budget. And I'd like us to consider funding again because we've always economically, the Clallam County EDC, any success that they bring to the county, we always get the largest share, being the city of Port Angeles. So the county, Clallam County is partnering with the EDC for $48,000. Our city of Swim is partnering for $20,000. The city of Forks is partnering for $5,000. And there's an obvious omission from the city of Port Angeles, so I'd like us to consider partnering with the EDC along with our other cities and county partners. And I would like to ask the staff if council's in agreement to come back in the final budget maybe with the amount of approximately $10,000 so we can partner with the Clallam County EDC with the other cities and the county because we're at the table and we receive any benefits that come into our county. So we should step up and make an effort. So
Would you make a motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that the city of Port Angeles makes a $10,000 contribution to the Clallam County EDC for 2020, and the staff will bring us back information on how we can put that in our budget at our next meeting.
Second.
All right, we got a motion on the table and a second. Any discussion?
And where would that money come out of?
That's what we're asking staff to come to report from us because I'd like staff to consider that.
And I would say that, at the end of 2019, we had savings in our budget. That was, I believe, around $1 million. And we have applied that via priorities, right? Most of that, I think, is going to, like you said, one-time project-related or capital outlays. I think that as a pilot, $10,000 could come from there to say, and then in the future, if that's something that we think provides a benefit to the city, that can be part of a sustainable budget.
She did say in her presentation that there was an increase in $1,600. Right. So that means if we could use that, then we'd only look for $8,400. I'd like staff to come back with a suggestion on how we could do that.
So Madam Mayor and Council, if that is, if the motion succeeds that's on the table, staff would be happy to identify a location where that might come from and what the trade-offs might be, if any, and where that money would need to be pulled from. I just want to clarify the reason you don't see it in is based on our July council budget goal-setting work session where we were told by a majority of council that was not something council wanted to fund. And that's why you do not see this item in the budget. However, if council has the purview to change their mind, and if, again, the motion is successful this evening, we will locate the dollars and we'll let you know what the trade-offs might be.
So is there a motion at that work session that said that explicitly?
There were not, but we had at
Yes,
least-
at our work session on bathrooms, because of a lack of a motion, you inferred that council did not support. So I'm confused. Without a motion, you inferred that we didn't support something. Without a motion,
It's the same assumption. Without a motion, the inference was we didn't support it.
He's saying it's okay, that's fair.
It's the same. Just a different issue, different time, but I wasn't at the bathroom presentation, but.
All right, any further discussion? Yes, Mike.
I will not support this. We get a lot of numbers, we throw a lot of dollars at it, we get a lot of graphs, charts, hopes, wishes, dreams. We provide some salaries to those folks that are in the EDC. And it's come up at past council meetings that the amount has gone down lower and lower and lower to the point now where it is nothing. And they've had some changeovers there. And I understand the point of being a good partner with the rest of our municipalities and the county. But right now, I have not yet to see specific things that the EDC has brought in that brings something that wouldn't have come otherwise. And as of right now, I can't support this. And I am, again, slightly torn because I realize there are other cities and county are putting into this, but for me personally, it's more dollars going out that I'm not seeing a return yet.
I can see both sides of this because I think if we don't give them money, then can they not do the stuff that we might benefit from? But I also just feel like even the presentation we had didn't convince me that that was something I wanted to prioritize. Because obviously if we had way more money, we could do more bathrooms, we could support the EDC, we could do all those things, but we can't, we have to prioritize. And that to me just doesn't feel like one that at this point with a balanced budget today, I want to go and undo or add rather. And again, not that I want to make more work in the future, but if something changed, we could potentially make that change later. But right now, I'm not feeling compelled to prioritize that over other things.
I agree with Councilmember Meredith and Deputy Mayor Dexter. If we're going to look at funding development organizations in the community, we should look at the range of them, figure out the costs and the benefits of doing so, and pick the ones that have the best cost-benefit ratio, and not just say, well, we funded them in the past and everyone else is doing it, so we should do it too.
And I'd like to pipe in that I agree as well that I would prefer that funding to go to the bathrooms. I mean, we said that this was a priority. We're crawling to get them done. Any amount that we have extra, I would love for them to go to the bathrooms instead. So I will not be supporting this motion. Any further discussion? So we've got a motion on the table and a second. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
No. So it's I see, show of hands. So the ayes, please raise your hand. The nays, please raise your hand. Okay. All right, so how do we want to continue with this budget? Any changes we want to make?
I just wanted to speak quickly to the bathrooms. I definitely think that those are a priority, and again, same point. we do have a limited amount of money, and unfortunately, we don't have we could maybe find the capacity, but we also had prioritized code enforcement, which staff was able to put in, and I really appreciate that. So I certainly want to keep it on the front burner, so I want to make sure that it's a conversation we have when we get to the CFP. But I don't know that I want to make a big adjustment tonight.
Anyone else? Seeing like it seems like that's...
I don't know, that disappoints me, I guess. I think that, like I said, I just think about the Winter Ice Village, how long we're going to have Santa cans there, and how long we're not going to be able to point to a nice new restaurant across the street to our visitors.
And I would agree. Like I said, I would right now as well a motion to go ahead and add, we can find an extra $100,000 to add to the bathrooms. We can maybe get that one done as well.
Well, I guess the question that I had, when we talk about those unused funds, how, the CFP is just a priority list that we use to allocate those? And so what specifically were they allocated to in the 2020 budget, which of these projects?
For lodging tax?
No, for the the budget savings from 2019.
Oh, in the general fund. Let me pull the list.
So council, that raises a good point as well. If one of the components that's also being applied for in lodging tax is the city pier railings, and I believe that the city pier railings is also one of those items that the reserve money went to as a one-time expenditure. So perhaps if the lodging tax funding comes forward, there might be some additional money available. Some of the other ones are emergency related, provided by the fire department, as well as some IT related needs that Serena might have found listed.
Yes, so there were 3 fire department capital projects that were included in there, and I believe those were, I don't have the amounts in front of me, around the $200,000 range, $250,000 range. The city pier railings were included in there, $165,000. Code rewrite is placeholder for $150,000. And some IT needs as well, the one-time are in there as well, included around $65,000 to $70,000.
So would it be helpful to have I'm really okay with saying tonight, if those things happen, that it would be, I would certainly support prioritizing that money to go towards the bathroom fund and make that potentially go faster, right? Because there are a couple of items there that may or may not happen, or if the lodging tax comes through for that other bathroom, then that money could be reprioritized for the other ones.
And the second option would be to direct city staff to come up with another placeholder for public bathrooms and find those funds from other capital projects.
So there is one more option, and that is to look at, because the restaurant replacement program is in the CFP, we can use funding for that.
Okay.
Do we have a motion to ask staff to look for more funding for the bathrooms for this budget?
Yeah.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
So we have a motion on the table to ask staff to look for more funding for the bathrooms, and we got a second. Any further discussion on this? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you for working through that potentially creative problem solving with us.
Appreciate that. Okay. Any further discussion then on the budget amendment? So, on the budget, on the 2020 budget. So we need to open the public hearing for the 2020 budget. So folks, anybody in the audience who would like to address the 2020 budget, please step up to the mic and give us your name and whether you live in
My name is Jane Vanderhoof. I live in Port Angeles, and I happen to be on the Lodging Tax Committee. And I just want to say, I would like to know how much, I've asked staff this a while back, and I just want to know how much staff time is spent per year on the lodging tax issues. So that's what I want to know.
So staff, if you can get back to Jane on this, that would be great. Thank you.
We'd be happy to bring some information to the next Lodging Tax Committee meeting.
Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Dale Wilson, I do live in Port Angeles. Believe it or not, we have a public access television station here in Port Angeles. We've been broadcasting 24 hours, 7 days a week for the last 3.5 years. We've been doing that with a total input from the City of Port Angeles of $5,353. We might be able to do those bathrooms for a lot less. But seriously, we really would appreciate some consideration in this budget. We have, thanks to the last two councils, they have provided us a wonderful home, a perfect home for the studios at Peninsula Area Public Access at the old fire hall, and we are doing our best to bring it back to its original grandeur. We have a brand new roof on it. The last time the city put a roof on it, it cost $135,000. This time we did it for $7,000, and I guarantee you it'll last. It's an EPDM roof, it's an all-rubber roof. It's guaranteed for at least 20 years, the ones that I've been familiar with. And in part of my misspent youth, I was a general contractor. These roofs will last 25 to 30 years without any problem at all. So we're doing our part, and I would really, really love to see the city council. I should have prefaced that with this. Back in 2015, when we first started talking about bringing together a board of directors for the Peninsula Area Public Access Television, the Buskey Group sent out a survey, and 87% of the respondents said yes, they would like to have a public access media of their very own right here in Port Angeles. 87%, I don't know of anything else that you could get 87% of the people in this community to agree upon. I would like to see that desire of the community reflected in this year's budget. I don't know how much to ask, because I had no idea. I thought it cost $150,000. That's about what my house cost. But we have done so much with nothing for so long. I think you think we can do it forever, but we cannot. Now, we did just now receive a little bit of from the very first check we have received, should be in the mailbox, we haven't opened it yet, from the new franchise agreement. So, thank God, because we were just about ready to turn the lights out, folks. And, you know, I think we did enough to make our plight known. And I'm sad to say, I think it fell on deaf ears. We got a proclamation, and I took that proclamation down to the coffee shop and tried to get a cup of coffee, and they wouldn't do it. So, all kidding aside, please give us some consideration about something in the budget, just to make us feel like you want us.
Thank you, Vinay. Anybody else who would like to speak on the budget?
Mike Doherty, Port Angeles. It's a little disheartening not to hear more of a futuristic discussion. For 6 years, I think it's been at least 5, I've come to the council and asked, would you seriously entertain helping to lead for an electric vehicle charging station network around the peninsula, which would bring in new revenue to the electric utilities, PUD, City Light. It would also set a new baseline for local people to buy electric vehicles. So I think and it would also help the city electrify the fleet. In the last study I read, the fuel equivalent savings on an EV over fossil fuel vehicles is around 2/3, and the maintenance and repair is about half. So over a period of years, you could make a substantial savings. The courthouse has had a preheat by solar of the water in the kitchen, the jail, all the restrooms since 1980. That could be done here. You have a great exposure for solar, for both water preheat and solar heat. So if there's a way to bring that into effect, and you had a citizen tonight testify about the rapid solarization of California, That's one of the big headaches for BPA. They aren't shipping or wheeling as much power to California for either air conditioning or heating, depending on what season you're in. So it's a financial drag for us. So, you know, the rest of the world's advancing. There are a lot of millennials who would love to come up on the peninsula, but they want a secure, predictable system of charging stations. So I know we have a few. We got BMW money to get 6 or 7 more heading west. But there have been 2 rounds, maybe you're applying now, but there have been 2 rounds of part of the Volkswagen settlement, which the city of Port Angeles could have also either helped shape the administrative rules in the application or apply for the money directly if that qualifies now. We know the governor wants to do it. He mandated that the full 15% of the federal Volkswagen settlement go toward charging stations. So things like that would help. And then this climate change, not looking ahead, we can all picture, if you look at the probabilistic scenarios in the back of the 2-county report, sometime around 2035, there could be a serious breaching of Innishook. Who's going to pay for all the sheet piling? Some of us are old enough to remember the project when the Corps of Engineers did that, but the Corps is having their budget cut back by the current administration, so who knows what that will entail as far as sheet piling and re-armoring the spit. There are things like that. The wildfire studies found that it was done by Peninsula College, a professor and students mentioned that I think Clallam County's urban forest interface and Jefferson combined ranked about 5th among western states for catastrophic loss. So it's another one of those things we can sit back and then we'll have these emergencies like California, or we can start using the draft of the plan and some strategies that department folks worked on from the Port Angeles government in the 2-county study to start mitigating climate change. But I don't hear a discussion as far as those looking to the future type actions in the budget preparation.
Thank you. And I do know that we've had some conversation around that when we did our utilities.
As well as vehicle discussions.
Anybody else in the audience who would like to address council? All right, so we're going to continue this public hearing to December 3rd at the council meeting, and let me read the ordinance, an ordinance of the city of Port Angeles, Washington, adopting the 2020 budget for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2020. All right, anything else on this? No?
I think a number of those comments hit on some of the challenges with budgeting, which isn't so much the numbers that Director Carrizozo presented, but the infrastructure we have that's hard to measure and quantify and then account for. I asked one of the state, well, we have a state mandate to balance our budget, and we're doing that. I asked one of the state auditors who assesses whether we've done that, how do you account for deferred maintenance? And she said, we don't. That's a policy decision within the city. So a number of these comments, I think, get to that question of how do we address deferred maintenance, how do we plan for that, and how do we adapt our current infrastructure system for what we need in the future. So thank you for those comments.
Can I just make one other comment? This is not related to the 2020 budget, but since we're talking about kind of those long-term budget issues, the 2 programs that I just want to remind the council that I made these comments at our work session would be, finding a funding strategy for the paramedicine program. The fire department has had a pilot project for 2019, which is coming to a close. And that will require other community partners, of course. And then also keeping in mind that, the rediscovery program is currently funded by almost entirely by grants. And we have some amount of skin in the game, but I certainly would like to see a sustainable budgeting approach to that program going forward into the future that ensures year-round service, that ensures an increase in capacity, because I think what we've seen from that program's successes is that there's much more need out there that is unaddressed.
All right, and thank you, everybody. Council, if you don't mind, I think we should hop over the capital levy presentation. We have Superintendent Marty Brewer here. So if that's okay, that will be our next item.
Thank you very much for having us today. Accompanying me today is Nolan Ducey. He's the Director of Maintenance and Facilities for the Port Angeles School District, and we appreciate the opportunity to present this to you this evening. We have approximately 15 minutes, so we're going to go at a rapid pace. First slide here, this just basically defines the mission of our district, and we want to align the mission, which is academic learning and excellence, but we also want to have the excellence as it relates to facilities. As a new superintendent in the school district, I've spent the last year and a half really listening and learning. I think that's the most important thing that I can do as a new leader in the community. And we have, over the last decade, had well over 150 community members come together to help devise a long-range facility funding plan. And so I've spent time working with my staff, working with the documents to understand why we're at where we're at today and how we move forward. So in reviewing that material, the feedback to me was very clear. This community expects, number one, our district to maximize state dollars. That comes in the form of Scat funding. It's, in an easier term, it's grants. When you have local funds, you get grants from the state of Washington to maximize your funding programs. This community expects a long-range plan. And I think that's maybe what's been missing in the last two campaigns. There was an effort for the high school, there was an effort for the middle school, but not a vision for all of our schools over the course of a 30-year period of time. The plan needs to be performance-based. This is a hardworking community, and every dollar counts. And so we need to be accountable for the dollars that we ask from our tax base. And it also needs to be a consistent rate. I've heard time and time again, it's really difficult to plan on a fixed income with a fluctuation of a rate. And so I believe our plan tonight that we'll present to you will achieve those three goals. As well as, and most important to me, is minimize the burden on local taxpayers. We need to do our very best to address that issue. This first slide speaks to that. In 2014, we had an EP&O levy, which is the old M&O levy, which is the operational levy of a school district, of $3.20. We asked the people to consider a $2.19, $98 million high school bond. It was a 30-year bond. Combined rate of 5.39. The people said no, at 49-point-something%. In 2018, we came back with a 6-year capital project Stevens Middle School levy, and our tax rate that year, our EP&O was $3.01. We came in with the Stevens project of $2.47. The people said no. So our real tax that year was $3.01. Current proposal is this. Our EP&O is an all-time low, historic low. And so when you hear storylines in the community around percentage increases, that may be true, but we are 50% less than what we paid in our EPO in the year 2018. Our board worked really hard over the last year to reduce our operational expenses. We reduced our budget by $2.6 million to balance the budget on a $1.50 EP&O. The board had the authority to raise that EP&O to $2.50. We chose not to do that. Why? Because we need an investment in our facilities. Our infrastructure is failing. The current proposal asks our voters to consider a $2.62 capital projects levy that would be 5 years at $2.62. What's the difference? If you take in consideration the 2018 levy, the actual taxes paid of $3.01, we're asking the voters for a combined tax rate of our operation and our capital. We're asking for an additional $1.11 from the 2018 rate of $3.01. This next slide puts it all in perspective. There's the real ask of the Port Angeles School District. Combined, $1.36 less than we attempted
in the year 2018. We're hopeful that our community will consider this, as we are really trying to understand and balance the budget, just as you are, between the operational costs and the facility costs.
So there's a lot of information here, so I'm going to go pretty quick. A lot of the things we hear is our buildings don't last. So if you look at the buildings here, Franklin, Hamilton, and Port Angeles High School, most of those buildings were built in the 50s. So they're coming up on 70 years old. We've got Stevens built in the 60s and Roosevelt built in 78. But this is a 30-year plan. So Roosevelt right now is 41 years old. So it's going to be close to 70 years old when we replace it. We've also invested in the future. We built a safety vestibule at Jefferson, and if you haven't seen that, as you walk in the front doors, you can no longer walk in with the kids. There's a couple of doors stopping you there. You have to go and check in with the office. If you've got the right credentials, then you can go into the kids. So we're protecting the staff and the students from just people walking around. And we're also developing a long-range plan. So the fundamental principles of this plan are, we're going to start with Stevens and establish a K-5, 6-8, 9-12 school system. Right now we've got a K-6, and the issues are that we have very little space left in our elementary schools. So establishing K-5, 6-8, 9-12 is going to help out. We're going to try to set a rate for 30 years. Again, we're maintaining, the target rate is $2.50 to $2.75 for the whole 30 years. And we're going to decide, or let the voters decide every 5 and 6 years to give us a performance base. We've got to do a good job with money to keep it moving. Maximize the use of state funds. We're looking at grants from the state, the $18.4 million for this facility. Make our school safe and establish, this is big, establish a community-based facilities advisory board that has a lot of input on how we move forward and what the schools look like.
And I want to add to the establishing a K-5, 6-8, and 9-12 system. Currently, I think the community doesn't really understand what we offer. We have a K-6, a 7-8, and a 9-12. And when you think in terms of adolescence and that challenge that we all went through in our adolescent years, the real challenge is, as we have a 50% turnover every year at the middle school, for our students to feel welcome and belonging in a middle school setting. It's a real challenge for our staff to address their needs, as one year they're the 7th grade, the next year they're exiting. And so I think that's a story that hasn't been told, and it's really important to align our practice with best practice across the state, which is a K-5, a 6-8, and a 9-12 system.
And so what the plan is it's going to start at Stevens, it's capital levy, and so this is just a conceptual drawing, what it looks like. It could be a lot different from this, but this shows you what we're looking for. And this is going to be, again, a community is going to get to decide what it is. But we're looking to add a new construction. It's going to be 2 different phases. So it's a capital levy. We collect money as we go. For a capital bond, you get all the money up front. You can buy the project right away. Design to a new school is 3 years. A capital levy we collect on your tax payments spring and fall. So we collect a certain amount every year. We can't go out to bid for a project until we have that money in our pocket. So, but the capital levy does take longer to see results. So there's 2 phases. The first phase, you're going to see 18 classrooms, new athletic fields, expansion of PE and cafeteria, new music rooms and new restrooms. It's 37,000 square feet of new construction. You see it on the map on the yellow building that's off to the left. But where it actually is when we finish the project, we don't know. I just haven't spent enough money on that. But what we do want is one single point of entry. So when you go in Stevens, just like Jefferson, you're going to be safe and secure for the whole day. If you move out to the other buildings, we're going to have covered walkways and keep the security there. Phase 2 is a complete remodel down to the existing concrete slab and build it back up. It's a safety and security improvement. So what we're promising is 109,000 square feet for 930 students. And so again, the capital levy, you collect the money and it takes a while to get going. So in 2020, we're going to use some capital funds with the district if this passes and get the single point of entry at all the elementary schools that we have in the Port Angeles School District. In 2021, we're going to design, bid, and build the Monroe Fields. We've got the Monroe space there waiting. We are sorely needing sports fields on the east side of town. 2022, we designed the Stevens building. 23, 24, we bid and build the new Stevens first phase. So that will be done. In 2026, we bid and build the modernization of Stevens, and 2027 is the completion. So again, we'll start tax collections in 2021. We will not complete this project until 2027.
I want to add to that, and Nolan has referenced it, but patience is the virtue as you go through a capital projects levy. As a bond or a mortgage, it's similar to a mortgage that we pay in our own personal lives. You know, if we bond it, we get the ability to take a loan and build a school. And you can see a turnaround from an election date to opening a school in about 3 years. This is going to be patience because we're going to collect about $10 million a year over the course of 5 consecutive years. And again, as Nolan referenced, we can't build until we have the money in the bank. And so it is a 7-year plan that will bring us to completion of the middle school.
One of the things too is when phase 1 is done, we want to come back to the public and show them that we're taking care of their money, that we're doing a good job with it, and that we're promising what we're delivering. And then in 2025, ask the public if they will convert that capital levy to a capital bond. At that point in time, then we can do a lot of work at a quick time. So in 2025, if they'll pass the bond, we could do a brand new Franklin Elementary School and a major portion of the Port Angeles High School. 2031, go back to the high school. 2037, go to Hamilton, and 2043 to Roosevelt.
And I want to call the attention to Port Angeles High School being in 2 bonds. You see a 2025 and a 2031. The reality of that is we don't have enough bonding capacity to build that high school in 1 bond at this point in time. In 2014, we took an initiative to the people for $98 million, and that is a lot of money in Clallam County. We have seen a 40% increase in construction costs from that date. So that same building today would cost our taxpayers $140 million. Now, that escalation in construction cost is not common. It's more around 3.5% to 4.5% annually, but we've seen with the markets and with the economy in Washington State, we've seen the escalation in construction costs greater than the average. So again, Port Angeles High School would have to be handled in 2 major initiatives.
And being able to go back and bond in 2025, you'll see that the timeline sets out that we start at Stevens, but we can deliver 3 buildings if we pass that bond. We can deliver a brand new Franklin Elementary School, we can deliver a brand new Stevens Middle School, and a very major portion of the Port Angeles High School. And again, this is performance-based. In 2031, we come back and finish the high school. 2037 Hamilton, and again, I talked about Roosevelt. We're not looking at it until 2043. And that's in the best case scenarios. So if you look down at the bottom, we have a study and survey done by outside architects that are authorized by OSPI, which is the Superintendent of Public Construction for the state of Washington. They come in and look at systems. They're looking at your building envelope. They're looking at safety systems. They're looking at seismic stability. They're looking at heating and air, electric, plumbing, fire sprinklers. And so they give a rating of the systems. They're not looking at paint. They're not looking at carpet. They're looking at systems. Right now, Franklin is at 25. So to put that in perspective, we give you the condition scale on the left. You see that none of these buildings are in fair condition at this point. They're all in poor condition and unsatisfactory condition. You look at Stevens, is going to be in unsatisfactory condition in a couple of years. And soon to follow by Hamilton. And the real point to look at is 2030. If we don't start with a project, if we don't get this construction started at some point with our community, we're going to have 4 schools in unsatisfactory condition in the city of Port Angeles, and another one coming there soon to follow. But another thing to notice is right now we know that Franklin is one of our schools with the biggest need, and it scores at 25. By the time we get to Hamilton, you can look on your sheet, that's going to be a 16. And that is, again, if this passes every single time we go out for a capital levy involved. So that scares me, what that's going to look like. And part of it too, I've heard the cost of the bathrooms earlier, and construction for state projects and school projects is really, really expensive. We've got prevailing wages. Long County is based on King County scale. That's what we're paying. We build the green standards, so they're all Washington State Schools protocol buildings. So they're as green as we can make them. And for the earthquake codes, we have to look at what the biggest earthquake in the last 500 years has been and build our schools to not only sustain that, but to be occupiable after that. That's a big earthquake in this area. So that's what drives up the cost of schools.
So I'm going to work along the left-hand side of the document there. There's a lot of questions around how do we arrive at the number. At the top you can see the new construction is, we started the state average. Last year for 18-19, the square foot state average was $415 a square foot. For the site development, i.e. the field developments, the parking lots, the bus zone that we so desperately need at the middle school to separate parent traffic from bus traffic, we need $60 a square foot. So we start this conversation at $475 a square foot. Then we know we can't take this project to bid for 3 years, so we're taking a conservative approach to the escalation of construction costs between 3.5% and 4.5%. We're saying 3.5% times 3, which brings us to a 10.5% increase. So now we're at $524.88. You can see the square footage of the construction bid price at 19.4. The soft cost on that document, if you turn that document you have over in your hands at this point in time, there's a cost analysis. It defines what our soft costs are. There are a number of requirements that we have to follow to utilize state dollars. And so those equal approximately 30%, and that brings the total to 25.2. We have a 10% construction contingency fund for errors of omission to bring that total to $27,771,400. The same thing plays out in phase 2 on the right-hand side, which is modernization. You can see right out of the gate, we are $100 a square foot less. So we start at $315. So it's good business for us to modernize when we can modernize. And so the existing building, we save $100 a square foot. The escalation costs, we know we can't take this project to bid for 6 years, so we're taking 3.5% times 6 years, which is 21%. Okay? So the total modernization cost is $39,243,204. Going to the center, we take the two, add them up, a little over $67 million for all-in project costs. State grants, state assistance, we stand to gain just a little under $18.4 million, bringing the local contribution down to $48,616,199. Again, second side of your document, that is explained in narrative form. There's going to be a difference between the ballot number and this number. The difference is defined by this. As you know, in public work, we don't collect 100% of our taxes. You know, if we collect 95% of our taxes, we're going to reduce that $52.5 million by $2.5 million. And the focus on safety improvements within our district, focus on field development, that brings us up to the $52 million. Finally, I'll leave you with this. We are trying to build voter confidence in our community. We need to get to that point so that we can, get to work and invest in our schools. This is a tax increase, and if we're going to have a performance-based plan, we want folks to understand that. For a $100,000 home, it's an increase of $262 a year. And you can see how that plays out. Millage rate of $262 per thousand. But I want to caution you on that. Because where we started this conversation, remember, we're at a historic low. Today, we're at $1.50 per thousand. That number was doubled 2 years ago. Okay? So my number of 262 increase, that is based on an all-time low tax collection by our Port Angeles School District. So finally, our performance-based facilities plan, we summarize these points with you this evening, and we certainly appreciate the opportunity to present this to you, and we can answer any questions if you might have them.
Counsel? Any questions, Counsel?
the bond schedule you have here, approximately every 6 years, I'm going to make the assumption that these bonds are lasting longer than 6 years.
That is correct.
So they're compounding as it goes on.
That is correct.
Thank you.
But our vision and our expectation of ourselves will be to that same flat rate, 250 to 275. So every 6 years, with the principal that we paid down, we're going to borrow against any new growth in the community as far as assessed valuation. So we'll have to assess and evaluate every 5 years on a cycle to determine what's really possible to hit that 250 to 275 rate. But our board is committed to carrying that out through the duration of the plan.
Okay, so even though you're compounding, you're still looking to have the rate, the rate to the taxpayers remain the same.
That is correct.
Throughout those bonds.
That is correct. Borrowing against the principal we paid down, against any new growth in the community.
Any other comments?
Certainly a lot. So I think the thing that I love is how community-oriented this plan is. I'll say that the first time I was involved in the school district's process as a viewer when they were hiring the new superintendent, and that's the first time I met Marty. And I remember, he probably doesn't remember because he was shaking hands with everybody in the room, but I remember thinking, boy, he listens really well, he's really friendly, he seems like a really high-tier candidate, which obviously he was. And I was thinking, it's probably one of those job interview skill kind of things, you just shake everybody's hand in the room. And, over the last year or so, I think we've seen that's really who Marty is. I really appreciate the listening that's happened over the last year. All those different, what did you call it, the community cafe kind of meetings that you had, I think those have really paid off. To that community-oriented plan where with this one levy, we're not just saying we're going to replace one school, we're saying we're going to do security enhancements, we're going to be adding sports fields, we're increasing the capacity of all our elementary schools. So that, and in the long-term plan, that community-oriented focus, we've had a lot of discussions about disaster preparedness in our community, where there's this Cascadia earthquake risk that's a 50-50 shot of a pretty major earthquake in the next 20 or 50 years. Building new schools to a high earthquake standard provides community assets where they're going to be placed throughout the community, various geographic locations that really raise our capacity for disaster preparedness. So that's part of the plan I think is a real winning point. But I think the big deal for me is the economic development standpoint. I can't tell you how many different discussions I've had at different places with the hospital, the Chamber of Commerce. I know has been discussing this a lot. The Housing Task Force, these things came up where there was not necessarily a bunch of bleeding hearts saying we need to do this for the kids. They were business leaders saying we have a potential economic job recruitment crisis on our hands because of the physical conditions of our schools. And so I think that from that economic development perspective, this really is the right time to invest. And so I really appreciate how thoughtful this plan is, how it really reflects the amount of listening that has been done by the school district, the action that was taken by the school district to be financially sound, which, I went to a lot of school board meetings during that, we call it the McCleary era, when everything was kind of up in the air. The legislature was doing something different every year. It was a hard time for school districts to plan. And in the aftermath of that, our school district, I think, made, like I said, really sound financial decisions. They didn't just grab all the money that they could. They said, let's be forward thinking. Let's think about, how to make sound, sustainable budgets so that we can retain, so we can invest in the capital facilities of our school district. So I think that this is absolutely something that that we should support as a council. And if other people have questions, but I really think I think we should. I will make a motion to direct staff to draft a resolution in support of the Credential School District's capital levy ballot measure.
Second.
We can't, statutes, I don't know if it's statute.
Council, I'd like Attorney Bloor just to specify what council can do.
Yes.
Before the council can take a position on this formally, it's required that we advertise the ballot measure and declare that the council intends to take a position on this, and then we have to allow equal time for any opponents to speak. So this would have to be scheduled at the next council meeting. So the appropriate motion would be to direct staff to set this up for the next council meeting. So
I'll amend my motion to that.
And
Thank you.
I'll, I guess withdraw my second at this time. He's amending-
Clarification, will there be a title and ballot number by our council meeting on December 3rd, or is that still too early? Because we need to advertise the title and ballot number too.
We have a resolution, but we don't have, we have a resolution title, a ballot number, no.
So our next council meeting, I would amend my motion to say that, like I said, like our attorney said.
So the motion right now, you're saying, is that you want staff to go ahead and set things up as soon as the school district
Yes.
has a valid title?
We have to have a ballot title. Okay.
And so do you want to second that?
Sure.
Okay.
I jumped the gun, I apologize.
Right.
Yeah,
So we
but-
have a motion on the table.
I'm just so excited.
I understand that we have,
And so we have to also, I guess, set up to have the opposition give
Right.
equal time. So, okay, so we have a motion on the table in a second, so we need discussion on this motion.
Well, I think we have to follow procedure regardless of how we individually feel about our support for, I will just say right now, I, as an individual, would have seconded your motion also. That being said, we do have a procedural obligation to hear the other side because we haven't done that yet in order for us to make a decision as a body. So I would support the motion so that we can move forward and give equal time before, as a group, we make a decision.
Anybody else who would like to speak that hasn't spoken yet?
I really appreciate the presentation, thank you. I think one of the things that has hamstrung some of the past efforts the last 2 years is the issues identified of, first is high school, then it's the middle school. This plan is very comprehensive. I think Councilmember Meredith's question is one of the questions I was thinking of during the presentation and also based on the handout that, well, we're covering this next year, but what's it going to look like after that? And so presenting and knowing that the plan is a stable tax rate throughout this whole timeline. I mean, it's impressive, and I think the more that the community knows, hey, this isn't just going to be good for the next 2 years, it's going to be good for this whole multi-decade approach. And so I really support the effort, this early effort by Councilmember French and Kidd to put this resolution forward, and I hope that we have that conversation at the appropriate time.
Did you want to, anybody else like to pipe in? So I'd like to pipe in the sense that I think the community needs to realize that right now we don't have any schools in the fair level. I mean, that's, a 60%. And that's really, right now we have 4 schools in the poor level, which is from 30, what was the number? From 30 to 61, and then we have 1 that's at 25%. This is one of those things that I'm always really surprised at, because I know before coming to Port Angeles, the community that I was at had very strategically updated every one of the schools that we had in our community. So they were all new, which was amazing. The fact that when I came here first and looked at the high school, there was just no way that this was acceptable for me to bring my kids here. And that was 10 years ago. So actually 15 years when I first started considering this. So even back then, our schools were not in good shape. And so what I want to say is that schools, in my research, have always reflected, they're the number one, they're an indicator of the health of a city. And if our schools are in this shape, we really need to take a good look at what our cities lack. This is going to keep us from growing. This is going to keep people from coming to this town. And it's imperative that we do something about fixing our schools. Whether this is the plan or not, it doesn't matter. We have to do something about our schools. So I appreciate the thoughtful consideration for the long-term plan, which is really, I'm really grateful for that. But we have got to invest in this, because this is an investment in our city and in our future. So thank you for that. So we have a motion on the table.
Would you prefer I withdraw my motion and we just?
No, because at least it moves it forward, staff knows what needs to happen, so.
Before we vote, I just wanted to make another comment to support what the mayor just said. I've mentioned this book before. It's at the public library here. It's called The Rise and Fall of American Growth, the U.S. Standard of Living Since the Civil War. It's one of those really thick books that you want to read the intro and then skip to the policy recommendations in the last chapter. And the first policy recommendation from this economist is invest in universal preschool. And this is an economist talking about how do we reverse the downward trend of economic development in this country, invest in preschool. I think that translates over to investing in schools. Councilmember French said, that let's look at this economically, but I also think we should just look at it. We should leave a better community for our kids than we got. They should be able to inherit something better. And the quality of the school system, the infrastructure that they get to go to school in is part of that. So let's pay it forward as a community, and it pays off for everybody.
So, go ahead.
Just briefly, I like this plan, I like the scope, I like the vision, and the reality is, our schools are one of the major pillars of our community. And if we abandon our schools, then we might as well shut off the lights and leave town, because we won't have a future. And it's so important, if we are going to make an investment, we need to invest in our schools. It's critical for economic development, it's critical in every possible way for quality of life. So some of us are fortunate to have gone to Port Angela schools and graduate from Port Angela schools, but we understand the need for them in so many ways, because through the chamber, through every organization, we hear, how do we attract good physicians? How do we attract good teachers? How do we attract new businesses? Without good schools, we won't. So this is an important step for all of us. Thank you.
So the last thing I would just like to say, I've mentioned this to Superintendent Brewer privately and the mayor and our city manager, is one idea that I did have was in our council strategic plan, our community conversations, and one of those is around schools. So if the school board wanted to, and I'll leave that in there with their decision, but we could have a larger scale conversation. We could host a town hall where we had, pro and con. I'd be happy to represent city council. I'm sure that the superintendent would represent the school district, but if the school district wanted to have a larger conversation, and because I think that with a lot of members of our community, we've had, 2 ballot measures in the last 6 years or so, and this is going to be a third. There are a lot of questions, and I don't want to ever say, I think questions are good. I think that we have a lot of good answers, and I think that it's important to ask those questions and answer them. So, like I said, I think that would be something that we should provide an opportunity for people to have their questions answered. So if we wanted to have a larger scale event that was just a long, town hall type event, I think that's something we should consider.
So we have a motion and a second on the table. Any further discussion on that?
Can we just clarify the motion so that we've got the language in there that's compatible with the state law?
Right, so the motion was the staff.
Can I have a moment to clarify this? The clerk needs a moment.
No problem.
And maybe I could just amend it again. Well, I mean, like I said, to direct staff to work with the Port Angela School District to find an appropriate.
Oh, you want it?
So if the school district wanted to have a larger scale town hall, we could do that. Or if they did, we
Just leave it alone for now.
You can do that if you want. I'm really good at making things more complicated. Well, I'm saying, like, if we have a time at our council, like the RCW question is about use of public or facilities in campaigns. So a town hall would be the use of a public facility in a campaign. If we wanted to do that, that would be a way for us to have that conversation. Or if we didn't, then we could have that conversation where we could, both sides, and then vote to endorse it or not.
Since we've had it here, it will balance out over time. So, okay, so clerk, what's the motion, right?
The motion is to direct staff to prepare a resolution in support of the school levy and add it to a future agenda once the full title and number of the school's ballot proposition has been provided, and give notice that members of the public are afforded an approximately equal opportunity for the expression of an opposing view.
That's fine.
Is that, yeah, I was just going to say, because it doesn't allow us to change, I mean, saying we're supporting this, while we have not heard the other side.
So we're drafting a resolution, we haven't voted on the resolution yet.
Okay, okay. Okay, that's true. All right, so that is the motion on the table.
Yes.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yes, for it.
It passes unanimously. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And folks, at this time it's 8:30, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we will continue with we'll get back to the agenda. Thank you. We'll get back to the agenda. We have a guest here, and Lisa. I'm afraid I don't know how to pronounce your last name. Okay, and welcome. I think we will do the item under other considerations, the local option bill for tabulating votes. So,
thank you, Madam Mayor, council members. It's a treat to be here tonight as a guest and to be able to listen to the warmth of the stories of your colleague and friend, Jim Moran, and all of the hard work that you're doing, I must say, with a very inspiring feeling for me to watch you doing this hard work together so respectfully. I will ask just with help from, how do I get to my slides? Wonderful clerk who helped me so much. I'm afraid I'm not
From the
exactly
desktop,
sure.
if you want to just escape out of that presentation. I'll bring it up when you're ready.
Okay, so I'm actually ready. My name is Lisa Abro, and I am born and raised in Washington, but a guest here in Port Angeles tonight. And I'm a volunteer and the chair of Fair Vote Washington. We're a nonprofit in the state of Washington working on a reform called ranked choice voting. And I'll start tonight just by asking if you would let me know, is this a reform you've heard about before, ranked choice voting? Is that a familiar word at all? Anybody? Okay, that's great. I really appreciate just having a sense of, thank you so much. Oh, how's that? Is that working? Great. Oh, thank you so much, Gary. You have a gym there. All right, now how do I get here?
she's got to turn.
Oh, she's got to turn. All right. Well, ranked choice voting is the name of the reform I want to speak about tonight. And I want to just start by here, just tell you a little bit about our organization. We are volunteers all over the state working to let our fellow Washingtonians know about this reform because, as we experienced in the room here tonight, most people still haven't heard about it yet. It is in the national news a lot, but it has not reached our state tremendously yet, so we're working on it. So, we go around the state, I get a chance to do this, and it's, with a backdrop of impeachment hearings in our nation's capital, I don't need to dwell here, but we've got some challenges, really significant ones to our democracy now. And the question is, how are we going to fix this? As Winston Churchill observed, democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the alternatives, right? So given the alternatives, how are we going to fix this? Well, if your democracy isn't working, you want to look at the foundational, what's at the very foundation, the roots of democracy, is how we vote. And what I'd like to talk to you about tonight is why it makes sense then to look at the way we vote now and look at what that's doing to the way we function as a democracy, and how making a change, one simple change to the way we vote can actually address many of those challenges, and how specifically we're going to take a little look at a high level, but then we'll definitely zero in on how ranked choice voting can help Port Angeles City Council elections. And we have a bill in the legislature right now called the Local Options Bill for Ranked Choice Voting, and we'll have a look at that. So very quickly, one of the problems with the way we vote now is called vote splitting. Here's an example from the Oregon governor's race in 1990. So in this race, Oregon does not have top two, and the winner was Democrat Barbara Roberts with 45% of the vote. There were two other candidates in the race, and in this particular race, independent Al Mobley shared conservative views. He was further even more conservative than the Republican Frohnmeyer, and it was argued that that 13% of the vote really could potentially have been siphoning off from Frohnmeyer's possibility of winning him. So even though 53% of the voters wanted a conservative, the Democrat still won the election with 45% of the vote, less than a majority. So if you're a conservative who likes Al Mobley, you have a tough choice. What do? Do you vote for the candidate you like best? But that could potentially elect the candidate you like the least. So that can feel a lot to voters like they're throwing away their vote, right? So there's an incentive for voters, instead of voting for the candidate they like the best, instead to pick which of the two other frontrunners is for them the lesser of the two evils. Not a very uplifting way to approach your responsibility to vote in. You might think that our top two primary system solves that difficulty, but in fact it just shifts it back to the primary level. We can have, for example, what's called a walkout. Can happen to either party. In this case, in our 2016 primary for state treasurer, the two candidates who had the most votes and therefore advanced to the general election were both Republicans. Even though more than half the voters wanted a Democrat in that election, the fact that the Democrats split their votes among three candidates compared to the Republicans between two led to this particular result. So we can see that vote splitting is a problem that is not partisan. It affects either party. By the way, I forgot to mention that we are, Fair Vote Washington, a nonpartisan, adamantly nonpartisan organization, and this is a reform that benefits people of all, it just benefits voters. There's no particular party benefit for ranked choice voting. Other problems that stem from our way of voting, the fact that we allow voters just to choose one candidate when we vote, actually drives the problem of negative campaigning. We'll have a look at why that is. Partisan polarization is exacerbated again by the fact that we just get to choose one candidate when we vote. Voters are letting us know that it's not working. We have the lowest voter turnout we have almost near the bottom. I think we're 26th of 32 countries recently rated in the Pew Research study for democracies around the world. So really a problem for us. So who's to blame? Well, we like to blame the voters who don't show up to vote. We say, hey, you should vote. That's the problem. Or we say, hey, the candidates, it's that like all those Democrats who wanted to run to be state treasurer, they shouldn't have all run, right? You say don't run, and there's a lot of strong arming actually of candidates that the parties do to encourage them not to run so that they don't have the vote splitting problem. But we think that choices are good in most aspects of our life. We like to have choices and options. Why not in our elections too? The problem is the system. We've got a voting system that is outdated, and we're so used to it. We're so used to it that we don't even see it anymore. We don't even see how poorly it's serving us and how outdated it is. Well, there is a better way to do this. It's called ranked choice voting. Instead of limiting the voters to choosing just one candidate on the ballot, a voter can rank their choices. You can say who your first choice is, but you can also indicate your next choice and your third, and so on, as many as you wish. You're not required to rank your choices. You can still vote for just one if you want, but you can give a backup choice, and so on. We rank our choices all the time. We're so used to it in everyday life, we don't even think about it. If I'm going to the store, make an apple pie, I'm going to look for Granny Smith apples. Those are my favorites for pies. But if they're out of Granny Smith's, I'm okay with Fuji's. And if I don't find those either, I'll get Pink Ladies maybe. So ranking, again, is something we do all the time. Now, at this point in our presentation, one of the things we love to do is give the audience a chance to experience a ranked choice selection. And I'm not, out of respect for your time tonight, we're not going to do that, but I'm going to talk you through it just a moment. So just imagine that we, all of us here in the room tonight, we're going to choose a pizza. So one kind of pizza that we're going to order, one pizza for all of us, one really large pizza. And you get to rank your choices now, okay? I'm going to give you 4 choices. And I'm going to ask, after you finish ranking your ballot, you're going to get to choose between sausage, pepperoni, vegetarian, and anchovies. All right. So everybody can rank your choices, and then I'm going to ask you to stand up. And if you chose sausage, we're going to stand up there near the red exit sign. If you chose pepperoni, we'll stand over there near the main door. If you chose vegetarian, we'll be over near the flag. And if you chose anchovies, you'd be over here with me. Everybody stands up and goes, you go where your first choice is, okay? That's what you're going to do. And then we're going to look around the room. And we're going to see, is there a majority of the people in any one of the corners? And we look over and we see, it looks like sausage. There's definitely the most of you over there. But is it a majority? Well, we'll have to count and see. We'll have to see if it's more than half of us. If it is a majority, the election's over. The point of a ranked choice election is to make sure that the winner actually has a majority of support. And if we have a majority of people over there standing with sausage, then we don't need to look at anybody's backup choices. We'll be all finished. But if sausage has the most, like the Democrat Barbara Roberts, who won with 45%, but not yet a majority, then the election's not over yet. And what we do next is we look around to see, well, who has the least then? Anchovies, yeah? So we're going to say to the anchovy people, look, sorry, you picked a dud. It's the least popular. We're going to eliminate that candidate, but we're not going to eliminate your voice in this election. So you folks now get to go and stand with your second choice. Everybody else stays right where they are, but the people who voted for the eliminated candidate go now to their next choice. And then we count again. Did enough people move from anchovies over to sausage and now they have a majority? Maybe a lot of people from anchovies actually all went to one of the others, and maybe there's now a majority in some other place. It's hard to know, right? Depends on the choices and so on. But we continue that process, eliminating the least popular and redistributing those voters' votes to their next choices until we have a true majority in one of the corners. That's the way ranked choice voting election works.
So did you actually bring pizza?
Oh, I made you hungry. No, it's such a long thing. You know, we do actually have samplings. In fact, we had a wine and appetizer ranking right here in Port Angeles 2 weeks ago. It was delicious. You should come to one of our events. So what are some of the benefits of ranked choice voting? Well, for one thing, voters have more choices on their ballot. How many choices did you have in the races on our general election ballot last week? Or 2 weeks ago, whenever that was? It's always 2, isn't it? Just 2. Well, on a ranked choice ballot, you can have more choices and still make sure that you have a majority winner. Those are the candidates for the Minneapolis mayor race in 2017. In a ranked choice election, you do not have to worry about throwing away your vote. If you like anchovies best, go ahead and vote. You're still going to have a voice in this election. So you don't have to do that strategic voting. Now, I love this slide. Do those 2 candidates look like their opponents? Do they look like they're both running for mayor of San Francisco? Well, they are. They're opponents. But they figured out that they actually shared a lot of policy positions. So they went out to the voters and they said, hey, you know, vote for me first, but vote for this, my buddy here, second. And so ranked choice voting, it turns out to be just a really, really bad strategy to go out and trash your opponents if you're trying to win. Because you can't necessarily win with just your narrow base of first choice supporters, right? You're going to have to reach out to people who are going to be voting for other candidates first, and you're going to be trying to get them to vote for you next. So you don't want to alienate voters. So what do we find? Ranked choice elections, candidates stay focused on the issues. They go out and talk to voters, knock on doors. That's the best way to win. It actually turns out that you don't need as much money to win ranked choice elections. In the most recent 2-3 weeks ago, when we had our general election, we had 11 municipalities around the country using ranked choice for the first time. A bunch of those people who won did not have were not the best funded candidates in their races. Generally, we find that people win, the one who has the most money usually wins. That's pretty high correlation. Not so in ranked choice elections. So not surprisingly, voters are liking it. They're turning out in higher numbers for ranked choice elections where all around the country where it's being used. And some of the places it's being used, all those places in yellow have either adopted or are already using ranked choice in some municipality within the state. Maine is the state that is using it statewide, and Alaska, Hawaii, and these other in blue are going to be using ranked choice for their Democratic 2020 presidential primaries. It's also used in Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, and it's how they pick the Oscars. Did you know that? Yeah. So how would ranked choice voting benefit you all here in Port Angeles in your city council elections? Well, there's a way to do ranked choice elections where instead of just picking one winner, you can actually pick a group of winners all at once. So if you're electing several city council members, instead of having to separate them and run by posted position, you can run them all on one ballot, and voters use the same ranked choice ballot, just the way we described. You rank your choices. You don't have to run separate races. One of the benefits, you get proportional outcomes. Right now, the way you elect your city council members, everybody in Port Angeles gets to vote on each position, right? Position 1, position 2, position 3. So it's feasible that the same 51% of the voters get to pick every single seat on the council. So if you've got a minority community, let's say that has 40% of the votes, and I'm just using minority to, could be political party, could be any way you want to imagine it. Voters might want to associate themselves as a group. If you've got a group in your community that has, say, 40% of the votes, right now, how many seats are they likely to get on the city council? 0, right? So 40% of the voting power in your community could end up translating, and often does in communities like this, to 0% of the seats on the body. And most people will tell us that they think that's not very fair. And with a multi-winner ranked choice election, if your group has 40% of the votes, you will end up with approximately 40% of the seats on the body. Proportional outcomes. No need for a primary in a ranked choice election. Just one ballot does it all. Now, not only is that, it has a ton of benefits, right? Primaries, we know, are low turnout. Who shows up for the primaries? People who vote in primaries tend to be older, wealthier, whiter, more conservative, and much more strongly partisan, which is why we tend to get strongly left and right candidates emerging from primaries. They tend to be more partisan than generally the voters would prefer. Primaries are also expensive. I'm afraid I wasn't able to get my research on the city of Port Angeles. Maybe you all could tell me at a later point how much you spend on your primary elections. But I do happen to know that the city of Vancouver, which I understand is a bit bigger, spends about $100,000 every time they run a primary. So that is money that could be saved if there were a wholesale shift to ranked choice voting. Now, one of the caution, I do want to say that those cost savings wouldn't come immediately, because as long as some races were still being conducted with a primary, the cost savings doesn't come until the primary is actually eliminated. But it's an incentive. And as I mentioned, this kind of crazy arbitrary system that we have here in Washington, which is, by the way, state law, that a body like a city council, they have to run by posted position. So when a candidate files, they have to pick which position are they going to run for. And I don't know if you all in the audience have ever had it happen, you all have been voters too, that you're looking at your ballot and you're thinking, dang, my favorite people are all running for the same position, so I'm only going to get one of them. And then I look at, position number 2, and I don't like either one of those candidates. And then position number 3, maybe it's running unopposed, and it's just quite, it's a kind of arbitrary thing, and it really isn't working well to serve our communities. And finally, multi-winner ranked choice voting is being used. This is not a theoretical idea. It's been used since 1940 by the Cambridge, Massachusetts City Council, and just this last election, East Point, Michigan City Council used ranked choice voting for the first time as a remedy to a suit by the federal voting the Justice Department. It sued the city of East Point, Michigan under the Federal Voting Rights Act for basically unfair treatment of their African American citizens who had never held a seat on city council, even though they were about half of the voters in the city. So under the settlement, the ranked choice voting multi-winner was the choice. So we have a bill that would allow local jurisdictions to try ranked choice voting. And we've been working for 3 years to pass it. Actually, this current version, House Bill 1722 and Senate Bill 5708, are coming back for the second half of the biennium in 2020. They will still retain the same 27 co-sponsors on the House bill and 7 in the Senate. We think we have it lined up for a good chance of passing this year, and we would dearly love to have a city council or 2 or 3 around the state pass a resolution to say we would be interested in trying this form of voting in our city, because that would give a good nudge to the legislators who often, the question they ask us, I've had the great good fortune to join our lobbying team this last year. I've learned a lot, first time I've ever done this, but they have asked us, okay, it sounds good, but do you have a city that has said that they'd be interested? This is our wish. We are, again, working hard as a group of volunteers all around the state. If you have questions, I'm happy to try to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. That was one. So, I want to say that I so appreciate the fact that it proves that if it encourages greater civility and less negativity in our campaigns and running, I would be all for that. I really appreciate that. I also appreciate the money savings for the primaries, because I think that that's really important. That it may actually encourage more diversity in the candidates that get elected. I think we need to continue to do that. I think that that's really important. So when this was brought up, I thought, gosh, that sounds interesting. I really appreciate hearing about this, so thank you. Thank you for presenting. And it's good to know that there is this option. Do we know where it stands in the Senate, or the bill?
The Senate is not as strong as the bill did not have a hearing last year in the Senate because it snowed. I don't know who remembers that actually one day was canceled in the legislative session last year because of snow. That was the day we were going to have that hearing. So we're actually back this week to speak with Senator Hunt, who is the chair of the policy committee that would have this bill, and he has promised us a hearing. We're hopeful that it will move forward there. So yeah, we're hopeful, and it is the case that legislators rarely change the laws that are governing how they were elected. So we are also making plans for a statewide ballot initiative in the near future. But this bill would be, it's required, let me just say that a charter city or a charter county does have the capacity to bring a charter amendment that could use ranked choice voting, but not for the multi-winner version. That actually is another part of state law that is not, my understanding is that it will require this local options bill to be able to remove that barrier for this use of ranked choice, which is a really smart one. I will also just add that there's lots and lots of research now that's demonstrating that all three of the results that you spoke to, Madam Mayor, the less negativity, and the more representative outcomes, I think you mentioned the third, I can't remember, that those are robustly being demonstrated as not being at all hypothetical now.
Wonderful. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
So I'll say that I was a candidate that ran into one of those issues where I had a specific council seat that I wanted to run for because it was held by an incumbent that I disagreed with. So I planned to sign up for it, and then somebody else signed up for it. And so then there was 3 people signed up for it, and I was kind of thinking, well, maybe he'll move to, the other person, maybe he'll move to a different, and he didn't. And so then we ended up having a primary with, I think, 3, competitive candidates that ended up being really close. And so I think ranked choice voting, and especially that multi-option, like those are pretty clear improvements in the voting system. I absolutely think we should support this bill. I think that this would be a great resolution to put on a future agenda so we can debate the actual resolution after having read it in detail.
So I see this resolution here, and I guess my question is, if we wanted to support the idea, can we pass it? Would a resolution be supportive enough to say, we would like the legislature to make this an option that we can consider, or do we have to say, if we wanted to be supportive, and timeline, of course, is an issue because we're talking about the legislature, would we have to actually say, we want to do this, or is it enough to say, we think this is a compelling option, and we'd like you to give us the option to consider?
Yes, just the latter. This local options bill, by the way, is only permissive, it is not prescriptive. It would simply remove the barriers that currently are in place that prevent local jurisdictions in our state from even trying ranked choice voting right now. It would simply allow them to try. And the resolution is just a draft, and of course you can do with it what you will. But our request would be, if somehow council could find the right way to say it for you that's comfortable, to simply say, hey, this could be a good idea. We would be interested in looking at this. That would be very helpful. Again, legislators would be happy to know that they would not be just working on something that's entirely hypothetical. And I will also add that there are several other cities that all of a sudden, just in the last couple of weeks, we've got, I think, 5 cities, none of which is Seattle or Tacoma, that are all interested, so we're very excited.
Well, this is the first I've heard of it, ever. And I see it's been in discussion in Olympia for 3 years, so, but we had it on our agenda, local options bill for tabulating votes, council discussion, but with no information whatsoever. And I didn't know what it meant. So there is information on my dais when I arrived tonight, but I haven't had a chance to really read or, so this is interesting. I would like to be much greater informed about it. I cannot represent the people of Port Angeles about something I'm absolutely not informed about. It'd be interesting for me to talk to Shuna Riggs, who's our in charge of our elections, and see, how that would affect the county or the elections or the costs, or it's to me, you've opened a Pandora's box and my mind's exploding, like what about this, what about that? So thank you for introducing this. It is an introduction, and I have to say I must study this further and talk. I think it's make a great community conversation. We really need to discuss this with our community because this would affect all of us. And I personally think we need to keep encouraging people to vote. When you were talking about primaries, hey, I'm trying to get out the vote. When I have scars on my knuckles from knocking on doors, I'm trying to get out the vote, and I think we all need to encourage that. But thank you for the information.
Good for you. I didn't intend at all that you would make a decision tonight. I realize many of you are hearing about this for the first time. New York City did adopt ranked choice voting just 2 weeks ago. You will be hearing a lot more about this reform. It is actually taking hold quite quickly around the country. So I'm glad to have had the opportunity to introduce you. Thank you. And I can happily send more information. For example, one of the papers that I left on your desk, the long one by the Campaign Legal Center, is well resourced. It refers to lots of studies and so on where you can find some of the references to those benefits. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
So I think our 2017 election was a great example of how this could benefit. And after that election, this is one of the reforms that I wanted to see how we could do. In brief research on the Code City statutes, it seemed like our options as a city was to kind of divide up into districts and have maybe West Side or East Side, and then some at-large council members. I think in a city of 19,500 or so people, that didn't really make sense. Our other option would be like become a charter city and try it, but it sounds like even that we couldn't have done multi-winner races. So hearing about this effort in Olympia, I really wanted to see this kind of come forward because I think it would be an improvement. So the 2017 election, we had 10 people file for 4 positions, but in the end, the voters had 2 choices. That was it. So position 1, 3 people filed, 1 was eliminated in the primary, 1 dropped out because he said, I think I'm really similar to the other guy, and Jim won uncontested. Position 2, as Mike described, 3 people filed, the incumbent lost in the primary, which is kind of unusual, and then the other candidate dropped out, I forget the reason, so Mike ran basically uncontested. I only had 1 opponent in this seat, and some people might not have wanted to vote for either of us. And then, Kate had 1 opponent, and maybe people wanted to vote for both of them, but they had to choose. So the 2 choices were me or Arthur and Kate and Travis out of 10 candidates for 4 seats. That's ridiculous. That's, I think, a case study for why we should move to a system like this. So this was something I heard about specifically on election night. I wanted to bring it up at our last council report. We adjourned the meeting before that, so I apologize to Councilmember Kidd that there's not as much information. But I would like to make a motion to direct staff to prepare a resolution for council consideration at our next meeting. A resolution based on the sample provided by Fairport, Washington.
Second. There's no way I'm going to support this without any further information. There's 2 sides to each issue here. There's an issue why the state is not jumping on the bandwagon to do this. Why? Well, I don't have that information. I read the information that Mayor Brooks sent via email, an attachment for what the House bill looks like. And I read through that is not necessarily a whole lot of information. So if 10 people ran for city council, so you have a choice of 8, not 2. Because you had 1, 2, 3, 4, times 2 is 8 people to choose from. I had my own opinion as to exactly how that dropping out of this and that went down that I'll keep to myself. But it's, I think there's more information to be had out there. I'm not going to support this at all until I have more of that information. It sounds very intriguing. I'm not going to discount that. It's, as Councilmember Kidd said, it definitely gets your mind thinking of how it works. And the presentation tonight was great to see, I guess, a better idea of how it would work, how this system would work. But I think there's more to the facts than just that. I'm not sold till I have the other side.
I think just like with your discussion around the school bond measure, that you would absolutely need to make sure that you're hearing a variety of perspectives. And may I quickly represent auditors who I have been very fortunate to have spent time in about half the county auditor offices all around our state, speaking with auditors about this reform, which they do not support. And I want to be very clear about that. The auditors are in favor of uniform election law around the state. They don't take a position on what kind of voting method it is, whether it's ranked choice, whether we stay with plurality, which is our first past the post, our current system. But what they do not wish to have to deal with is different jurisdictions within the county voting in different ways, and they push back against that. And it also is worth noting that at this point in our country, we have almost 8 million Americans who are using ranked choice voting, and in virtually every case, it is by local jurisdiction. So many of the logistical concerns that the auditors have very reasonably had in the last 10 years have largely been addressed in relatively recent years. So these are all the details which I completely respect you need to research. If you would like further conversation with me, more information from me, I'm happy to provide that. May I just also add, just for members of the audience who might be interested in looking more into this, there's a series of videos that are sort of the go-to for explaining a whole series of these election reforms, and they're 5 to 6 minutes each. It's called Politics in the Animal Kingdom. They're fun to look up, so you can remember that, Google that, Politics in the Animal Kingdom. And this particular reform for multi-winner is called the Single Transferable Vote. That's what it's known internationally, where it's used in Australia and other places. Single Transferable Vote, Politics in the Animal Kingdom. You'll have fun with those, they're a lot of fun. Thank you all.
Thank you.
So we have a lot of other business, so I really recommend that we just vote to put this on the next agenda and have the debate at the next meeting and move on to our business.
Right, so, but I would like to make a comment in the sense that I'm hoping that so we're voting to bring this up to the next agenda. Hopefully we will get more information from staff as we discuss this as well. And so the motion right now on the table is to bring a resolution forward, and hopefully that will have more information to be able to have the discussion on more information about this.
Right, whether we want to support it. So tonight is just to bring it back.
The motion maker's intent?
Yeah, to bring the resolution forward, just.
Yeah, my motion was to direct staff to prepare a resolution for council consideration at our next meeting.
Thank you.
So this, at the next meeting, this needs to be a community conversation. We're really rushing this, and not only do I need to find out more about the community, this is new. This is just a huge change, and if there's just, we really need to talk to our community and have a discussion, not just the council suddenly at the next meeting make a resolution. Let's take some time and talk to our community. I think this is rushing it.
I would agree if we were voting to say that we're going to make, that we're deciding right now that we want to make that change. I agree with you, it's worth talking to people, but I also think it's worth having an opportunity at the next meeting, learn a little bit more about it between now and then. What is the timeline from the legislature? And potentially move forward with support for the idea so that there's a reason to have a community conversation around it and see if it's something that our community wants to do. Because if the state doesn't change anything, then the whole thing is a moot point. And I think it's worth having an additional conversation about whether or not we want to encourage our representatives at the state level to allow this to be an option for us to consider.
All right, is that the end of the discussion? So we have a motion on the table and a second. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
No.
All right, so it is 2 noes to 4 yeses. All right, so the motion passes. So let us go back to the beginning of...
Madam Mayor, I might recommend, we've had some people waiting for a while. I3 was a item in the revised agenda added Friday. I might suggest that we move forward with that first.
All right, so let's take a look at the Directorate Water Service Area Agreement.
So Madam Mayor, Director Hunter is going to provide some additional details, but we're really happy to report that staff has completed negotiations with Dry Creek Water Association. We do have a new agreement before council this evening that was finalized for your review on Friday, and we are recommending approval of that document this evening. And at this time, we're really grateful to Dry Creek Water Association for how long we've been working together to bring this item to resolution. So we're extremely excited to be there. I would like to acknowledge Cindy Kelly, the Executive Director of Dry Creek Water Association. She's in the audience tonight, and I'm sure she may also want to say a few words relative to the agreement. But for now, we're recommending approval, and Director Hunter may add a little bit relative to this item.
Thank you, Council. First off, I want to say special thanks to both Cindy and City Attorney Mr. Bloor for helping me come up to speed on an agreement. If I could only explain the amount of drafts that I had to go through to understand where we started and where we ended, there was a lot there. I think the most important thing, if you look at the agreement as it sits right now, is it really gets us to a place where we have clearly defined service responsibilities, and from a customer service perspective, I think that this provides a lot of clarity for the folks that are out there. And so in that, I think that in its simplicity, I think it gets us to where we need to be. So anyways, with that, yes, we do recommend approval.
Thank you. Cindy, did you want to speak?
Cindy Kelly, Manager, Dry Creek Water. So I want to thank Nathan and his staff for diligently getting this done. It took us 32 months to get it done. My boy was towards the end getting really impatient, and we got the attorneys involved, and then finally got to the point of the resolution about 2 o'clock on Friday. So I think it's good for the customers, regardless if they're your customers or our customers. It's all about providing service to the customers, and I think that makes it very clear. I'm excited. I think some of your staff in the city is excited. I deal with 5 people monthly usually, maybe up to 7 if they have a leak. So this is just better for everybody all around. And I just thank the city for giving us at least 10 years. We'll see how this goes in 10 years with a clause that we could do an additional 10 years. But I think the city customers will see a reduction in their rates. And we'll be drafting a letter together to inform the customers within the city what will happen with the transition. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Board, for the patience, because I do know that you've had a lot of staff changes and things like that that have also made this process a whole lot more complicated.
Yeah, I was thinking about doing the 12th day of Christmas tonight, you know, like 5 city managers, 14 public works directors, 20 city council people, but I thought, well, maybe I wouldn't do that since we weren't to Christmas yet.
Thank you.
I move to authorize the mayor to sign and execute the water service area agreement with Dry Creek Water Association and to make minor modifications and should that be the city manager make minor modifications?
The mayor has the signature line on the document, so it would be the mayor to make minor modifications.
Okay, just clarifying, and make minor modifications to the agreement as necessary.
Second. All right, any further discussion on that motion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you so much again. Like I said, I know it's taken a lot of patience to get through this. All right, so we go back to the beginning of the agenda. So let's do late items.
So Madam Mayor and Council, we do have one late item for you this evening. The late item, we apologize, we wanted to take the time to run this by Department of Natural Resources before we actually move forward with the council resolution. It's a very simple matter. We would have added it to the consent agenda previously, recognizing all we are doing is going after a $50,000 grant. McKinley is proposing to pay the entire match of the grant, so no money out of the city's pockets for this particular item, although we will help with the application process. So it is application of a grant. Council will have an opportunity in the future to accept the grant if council so desires. It's just an application.
Great, thank you. And also, I know that, I know I've been contacted by press, and I think you guys have been contacted by the press as to when do we want to set the process for the replacement of Councilmember Moran. So we can wait, we can decide to add it to the agenda and discuss it now, or I'm leaving this up to the council to decide.
We have a special meeting on Friday, don't we?
Yes, we do.
So could we discuss it then?
Madam Mayor, if council, we want to be extremely respectful to Councilmember Moran, but if council would like a very brief discussion of this and to add it to the agenda, I could add some information that might be very helpful to council that might provide information that could help move that process forward without having the big overall discussion at this point in time.
We have 90 days to decide that. Let's not rush into things.
Yeah, well, I thought tonight was not the time to go into that. We'll have a meeting on Friday and that'll be different.
Friday's closed session, so we shouldn't do it in a closed session meeting.
But we can talk about it at the next meeting. I think that's okay. But if that's it sounds like the consensus, not that I'm in charge.
We are discussing a late item that is not on the agenda, so.
Yeah. All right, so it sounds like the consensus is we'll do this, we'll put this item at the next agenda, at the next meeting.
I move to put onto the agenda the authorization of the city to submit a grant application to the Washington Department of Commerce's Community Economic Revitalization Board for this meeting.
Second.
Okay, and are you guys all okay if we put that in the consent agenda?
Yeah.
Yes.
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 Okay. So let me read no more late items, right?
Correct.
Okay, so let's move on to the consent agenda. Oh, I'm sorry, we've got a motion.
To the council.
You informally did. And I don't know, I mean, maybe you can put a late item on anyway, or maybe the city manager can. I'm not sure our rules are clear.
Okay, well,
Consent agenda sounds great.
consent agenda sounds great, by consensus, okay. So let me read the consent agenda. City Council minutes for October 15, 2019, and November 6, 2019. Expenditure report from October 26, 2019 to November 8, 2019 in the amount of $3,647,104.83. Peninsula Housing Authority CDBG loan amendment, program agreement, Olympic Community Action Program, the facilities use agreement, Port Angeles Nature School, interlocal agreement for the Rural Broadband Planning Grant and the Rural Band Study, and this curb grant for McKinley.
Move the consent agenda as read.
Second. Any further discussion on that?
Yes. So just to speak to a public comment that happened earlier, the consideration that we would get for allowing the Peninsula Housing Authority to pay back their loan later is I believe they will pay it back in full sooner. So they start the payments later and then they pay back the full amount of the balance sooner than previously.
I just want to add on the rural broadband, I know that was something that Councilmember Moran was championing, and I think the mayor was as well. And so it is something for us to consider too as a council, maybe next year, when we have 4 additional people, kind of who wants to kind of take the council role in moving that forward.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So it passes unanimously. So let's go to ordinances not requiring council public hearing, the 2019 budget amendment number 3.
Good evening, Council. Tonight we have the third amendment to the 2019 budget. This is also the final amendment for the year, and it is primarily comprised of end-of-year changes and cleanup. Primarily, capital projects that will be deferred into 2020. So that same list that we saw on the presentation will be moved out of 2019 and into 2020. There are also a few items on there that were approved by council in the last quarter of the year. And then there's some cleanup for unanticipated expenditures that we did not foresee. And so there's amendment for those as well. And so I'm available for any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Any questions, council? All right, let me read the ordinance. An ordinance of the City of Port Angeles, Washington, amending the 2019 budget and funds. So That is our first reading of this, and so we will continue this to the December 3rd council meeting. So with that, we will move to the rezone application number 19-59.
Council, because this is a quasi-judicial matter, we're going to ask the city attorney to help qualify council members for consideration of this matter.
So this will be something new to some of you, and a few of you might remember when we did quasi-judicial qualifications. So before we had the hearing examiner, when we had a rezone application, the city council would conduct a hearing, just like you would have a hearing by a judge in Superior Court. So the city council in those cases would be subject to the same rules of fairness that a judge is subject to in Superior Court. To assure the public and the participants that the council was all qualified to hear the matter, there were a series of questions that the mayor would typically run through. Now, the thing that has changed is that we now have a hearing examiner. So whereas in the past, the council would conduct a hearing, hear witnesses, take evidence, and they would consider all of that, and they would make findings of fact and conclusions, and then they would consider all of that and come up with a decision. Now, the hearing examiner has done the bulk of that work. The hearing examiner has conducted a hearing, heard witnesses, received evidence. The hearing examiner has made findings of fact and conclusions and has submitted a recommendation to you. So everything's done except for the consideration. And that, though, still has to be done under the quasi-judicial rules. It's also called the rules for appearance and fairness. And so you need to accept the report package from the hearing examiner, consider that, and make a determination. But you do have to do that under the rules. And so I'm going to just go through this quickly, consider abbreviated qualification for appearance of fairness. So basically, the main single question is, can you hear and consider this matter in a fair and objective manner? And in considering that, you should ask yourself, do you ask yourself some questions that would reflect upon your own ability to hear this fairly? Do you have anything to gain or lose financially by the outcome of this rezone hearing? Has any member of the public approached you to talk about this rezone hearing? That would be considered to be an ex parte contact if we were in court. Does any member of this council live within 300 feet of the rezone area, or do you have any special knowledge that would affect your determination on this rezone matter? And that gets to the fact that in considering this, you must consider the record and only the record that comes from the hearing examiner. So if any of you have any responses to any of those questions, you should say so now.
I am within 300 feet, so I will be recusing myself.
Okay. And so that's a good example of what can happen. And again, it has to do with the appearance of fairness. If there is anything that might appear to somebody to be unfair, it's always better to recuse yourself. But you're the ones who make that determination. So at this point, if there is anyone else who has any reason to recuse themselves from hearing this, please do so now. And otherwise, if you have no responses to those, I think you can all be considered qualified to go on and hear the rezoning matter.
So I guess we've got one person recusing themselves, everybody else.
Councilmember Kidd, we'd be happy to come and get you after council's complete.
So tonight, thank you, City Attorney Bloor, for that introduction, but what we're looking at tonight is an application for a site-specific rezone of 3 approximately 7,000 square foot lots. They are currently zoned as lower density residential, specifically R7, and the proposal is to rezone them to community shopping district, or what we consider the CSD zoning district. As discussed in the attached hearing examiner staff report, all site-specific land use development decisions must be supported by the comprehensive plan and the land use map, and that was done so. So tonight we are recommending to conduct the first reading of the attached ordinance, to waive the second reading, and to adopt the ordinance, which is citing the hearing examiner findings and conclusions listed in attachment A. I should also just mention that the hearing examiner's recommendation was to approve the rezone.
All right, any questions? So I think when I saw this, I was really glad because I always wanted this to happen. So thinking multifamily housing, hopefully, that this is what it's converted zone. I mean, that's the idea for it. The only thing I would love to see, and this is just, you know, I guess this is above and beyond this one, is to, there's a parking lot next to it, a little building, another parking lot, to ideally use that bigger lot, make a bigger project out of it so that it's a better use of land for that whole area. But I love the idea that we're hopefully going to get a little bit of multifamily housing happening there. And so, and after reading the whole report, I am in full support. So then, let me, I guess, first read the ordinance. An ordinance of the City of Port Angeles, Washington, rezoning 3 7,000 square foot parcels from RS7, residential single family, R7, to community shopping district, CSD. So I guess, how do you want to move on?
Why is this a suggestion to waive the second reading?
Council, I'd be happy to address that. It has been council policy and practice on all quasi-judicial matters to waive the second reading. Part of that is meeting the time frame requirements, both in our statute, in Port Angeles Municipal Code, Title 18, as well as state statute, meeting the time frame requirements. Historically, council has always waived the second reading.
So I move to adopt the ordinance. I was just going to do that as part of it. Of the City of Port Angeles, Washington, rezoning 3 7,000 square foot parcels from RS7, residential single family, RS7, to community shopping district, CSD, based on the hearing examiner findings and conclusions that are listed in the council packet in Amendment A, and to also waive the second reading of this ordinance.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you. We get number 2 back here. So we are now on to, wayfinding services agreement contract.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So tonight, just looking at a amendment to a service agreement contract with 10 Graham Design. City Council approved the original professional service agreement with 10 Graham Design and authorized the city manager to sign the design agreement on November 21st, 2017. The proposed amendment is to extend the contract date to 1 year so that it ends December 31st, 2020, and to add additional work services to complete the content development and design of the heritage tourism signage component of the wayfinding program. Since council's approval, staff has worked with the city's PA Forward Committee as the primary body to provide feedback and guidance on the wayfinding program. Final design, the committee recommended to the City Council to approve the final design during their meeting on December 6, 2018, and then the City Council then approved the recommended final design component
at their meeting on February 5th of this year. The original services agreement with Tangram actually included a very limited scope of work for the heritage tourism signage component. Since then, staff has realized to allow a more thorough development of narrative and images. Staff asked for an amended scope from Tangram, and that's what's in front of you tonight. So specifically, you see an amended scope of work in Exhibit A. Additionally, you see the amended schedule and Exhibit B, and then the amended budget and amended Exhibit D. The Exhibit C, as it was in the original agreement, does not change. The funding the project has received a total of $212,000 from the Lodging Tax Committee, from the fund, and that was actually from 2017 and 2018. The proposed amendment tonight is requiring an additional $22,600, increasing the total maximum contract amount to $86,000. So the recommendation is to approve the amended professional services agreement with Tangram Design and authorize the city manager to sign the amended agreement and to make minor modifications to the agreement if necessary. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions first? I've got one. Go ahead. I've got one. So I know that this should finalize the design. So we're not talking about anything getting built yet, right? Is that correct?
Correct. This is the design, the professional services agreement for the design, and then more importantly, the plan of where the signs go within the community.
Do we have, I guess every design, the result of every design is going into implementation, and so the cost about that implementation, do we have any sense of how we're going to implement all this wayfinding signs? I mean, I feel like we've been at the design stage for a long, long, long time.
Yes, and I totally agree, and I feel the same way. So next spring, we plan to go out to bid for the first phase of construction, and the good news is because we've been supported really well by the lodging tax fund, we have money to do that first phase of construction, which we would hope to do next summer. And then the goal would be then potentially to come back next year to the lodging tax group and committee and eventually council to ask for funding for phase 2.
And do we know what phase 1 entails?
That's being finalized at this time. There's a review of that plan being done by staff.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
What does heritage mean in this context?
Yeah, great question. So we're really looking at that broadly. So it's the cultural heritage, it's the science heritage, it's the environment heritage. I mean, the signs proposed for this piece would be along our Olympic Discovery Trail, and so we're trying to recognize really the collective history that has occurred in that area, roughly starting on the east side at the Rainier Mill site, and then going over to really the industrial edge between downtown and the industrial edge to the west. We actually might even consider to go a little bit further since we are doing some great future work on the west end, especially by Hill Street, and we're going to have some really great new trail and pathways that allows you to look out to the harbor, and there might be an opportunity to really talk about that marine history as well. So we're in that development right now. We're trying to broaden it beyond than maybe what we have seen the current signs that exist described.
Any other questions? Council, how do you want to move forward?
I move that we approve the amended professional services agreement with Tangram Design LLC and authorize the city manager to sign the amended design agreement and to make minor modifications to the agreement if necessary.
Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes unanimously. All right, the next one's the Elwell Water Facility Professional Services Agreement.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. So before you, you have a document that you guys have seen a little while ago. However, recognizing the fact that city staff has only had this facility for a little over a year and learning some of the challenges and opportunities that we have ahead of us, we thought it was important to really vet this PSA, and more importantly, to bring in a second set of eyes to look at the scope and to physically inspect the facility to ensure that what we were putting out there really meets the needs of not just today, but for tomorrow. One of the things that we saw was that the scope was better than I think that we fully understood, and so we slightly revised it to include a little bit of a higher level of design to get some of these projects pushed forward a little bit faster. Because as we've realized here recently with the OWA facility, we do have some challenges out there, and we need to better understand those so that we can efficiently use the dollars that we have in the OWA fund. So tonight, what we're asking, or what we're recommending, is the approval and award of the OWA Water Facility Engineering Services Professional Service Agreement with Jacobs Engineering Group not to exceed the amount of $150,000, and to authorize the city manager to sign and execute the PSA with Jacobs and to make minor modification to the contract documents as he deems necessary. And I'm happy to go through and answer any questions, especially since it's been a little while since you guys have seen this.
Council, are there any questions?
Mayor, I move to authorize the city manager to sign and execute the engineering services professional services agreement with Jacobs Engineering Group and to make minor modifications to the contract documents as he deems necessary.
All right, do we need to add the,
Oh,
to accept the amount?
and I also move to approve and award the Elwha Water Facility Engineering Services Professional Services Agreement with Jacobs Engineering Company not to exceed the amount of $150,000.
Second. All right, we've got a motion on the table and a second. Any further discussion?
I just think this is a very wise move. This is very important for us, so.
And just for the public's understanding, this is a facility that the federal government built basically for us and transferred to us, and we want to make sure that we're using it in the efficient manner that provides the services that we are going to need, because it wasn't necessarily designed with what our city needs in mind originally.
All right, any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? It passes unanimously. All right, the next one, the Peabody Street, the Peabody Street sidewalk repair in Smithfield, Indiana.
Thank you again, Council. We had an opportunity here recently to take a number of different projects that were similar in scope and evaluate them for efficiencies. We found that we had a project in Peabody Street sidewalk repair, which I think you could say technically started a little while ago with some maintenance that happened. Following that maintenance, we were able to design a project to achieve a couple of different things on that section of roadway, and we can talk about that a little later on if it's necessary. In this particular case, and with the timing of the project going out, we decided to incorporate the Civic Field ADA access improvements. Our hope is that we achieve some efficiencies, not just in bid materials, but also paying a contractor to mobilize one time as opposed to twice, and things like that. It's important to note that in the way that the project was advertised, we understood that our budget amount might not necessarily correlate with the bids that we might get. Part of that suspicion was the Lordson project, where we saw concrete prices come in incredibly high. And so we decided to include Civic Field as an additive bid to the primary bid in the event that we wanted to move forward with Peabody if we did not have budget authority to execute on Civic. Well, as we suspected, that was the case. So before you, there's a recommendation with two different alternatives. I do think that if you look at the engineer's estimate relative to the Civic Field ADA bid, that we are relatively close. It is important to note that the two, I don't want to call them major issues, but the two increases in that bid package were primarily concrete and also the hand railing system. We've seen that in other projects throughout the city, and relative to the general cost, we feel our preference would be that we increase the funding and include the additive project, because we think that if we were to bid these projects separately, you're going to see an increase in the mobilization cost, and you could end up paying the same, if not more. So, with that, our recommendation for the Peabody Sidewalk Repair Project and the Civic Field ADA Access Improvements is to approve and authorize the city manager to award the base bid and sign a construction contract with Simons & Sons Contracting Incorporated for the Peabody Sidewalk Repair Improvements for a total bid amount of $76,920, and to increase the funding for the additive project, Civic Field ADA Access Improvements, to a total of $100,000. In that, you would be authorizing the use of refunding for the additional $25,000 required for the project. And you'd be signing a construction contract with Simon & Sons Contracting Incorporated of Montesano, Washington, who we found to be the most competitive bidder, for the total bid amount of $172,390,000, and make minor modifications as necessary.
Motion to approve is read.
Second. Can I just ask a point of clarification, which is, that was a recommendation is 1 and 2, not 1 or 2, right?
Correct.
All right, is there any discussion? No any questions?
I was just going to say quickly, I like this idea. I appreciate the bigger picture thinking moving forward, so that we are able to capture efficiencies where they exist. And I think with the more time I spend at Civic Field, the more I realize how much work it needs to be really an asset for everyone in our community. And they're definitely, when our friends go, their daughter's in a wheelchair and she has to sit in front of the railing because there isn't, I'm not sure this will necessarily accomplish that, but a step in the right direction for her to be more a part of the family when she goes to games. So I like the idea of building this in.
I absolutely agree. This is an excellent project. I like the way it's being done. I think everyone in town, we drive up and down Peabody every day, so it's highly visible. It'll be wonderful to make improvements. I think everyone will appreciate that for safety and for aesthetics. And we are using our civic field. It's become such a fabulous asset and a magnet for half the town. Now we have our baseball team, so our own lefties. So ADA accessibility. Wow, it's 2019. Let's do this.
So I want to just pipe into the Peabody Street. It's something that is long, long overdue, and I am grateful to see this project there. It's beginning to restore a little bit of our tree canopy because we are replacing some of those trees. And I don't know if folks knew, but some of the replacement of the trees have happened at the Lions Park and a couple of other parks. So we're beginning to address our tree canopy, which I think is highly important. I still think we've got a long ways to go in that, but I love the fact that we're starting. And so thank you, staff. This is a project, like I said, that we've been pushing for a long time. And it's nice to see it come to fruition. So thank you. All right, so we got a motion on the table in a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you. And the last one's the renewal of the Microsoft Enterprise licenses and subscription licenses.
Madam Mayor and Council, IT Manager Todd Weeks will be presenting that item.
Good evening, Council. Todd Weeks, Information Technology Manager. I bring to you this evening a memo that its purpose is to receive City Council approval for payment of our 2019 and 2020 subscriptions and licensing for Microsoft Enterprise licensing through Microsoft. This includes the full gamut of Microsoft licensing including our email licenses, our office subscriptions, all of our desktop licensing, all of our server licensing, all of the client access licensing that goes with that. These are typically amounts that we're talking about every desktop, every server, every employee, and volunteer and work. So, this is for your approval to allow us to a Microsoft.
Any questions?
I mean, for $231,000, couldn't we hire like 1 or 2 software engineers and use open source software and like build something that works better for everyone? So say Microsoft?
Just for clarification, this is it's $115,200 per year. We're asking for 2019 and the preliminary 2020 budget for sake of efficiency.
It still stands.
I'm not sure we're gonna find somebody that talented for $115,968 or $900.68.
We have to have security in our system. We know how dangerous it is, and we must have this. So I move to approve and authorize the city manager to approve payment to the state contracted reseller SHI for the city's 2019 and 2020 Microsoft Enterprise licenses and subscriptions in the amount of $115,900.68 per year, including taxes for a 2-year total cost of $231,801.36, and to make minor modifications as needed.
Second.
All right, is there any further discussion?
So have we looked at alternatives to Microsoft Office?
Microsoft Office is one piece of it. I would say that for the most part, we are Microsoft-centric. That is, our applications run on Microsoft servers, our desktop run Microsoft applications. As far as the subscriptions go, again, they are subscriptions from year to year. In 2021, we could absolutely review the need for some more open source licensing, and I know I'd like to have more discussions with you about this over the next few years as well. How we can move to more sustainable. Believe me, I look at this number as well, and wonder if Microsoft doesn't have enough, or if we. But and these are the struggles that all. I just went to a conference recently that all the municipalities, large and small, are struggling with, which is the cost of doing business and the increasing costs for frankly, the best software that we could run for these systems to make them not only more secure, but compatible and interoperability with the systems that we run.
And as you've heard me chime in before on this one also, I would seriously do want us to look at options, because I know that in Europe, they're not all the cities are not relying on Microsoft. There's a lot of other products out there that are open source. And so I think it behooves the city to just take a really good, hard look at. And I think the open source are getting better and better and better. So maybe not this time around, but hopefully in 2021, when this comes up again, that there might be options out there that are actually real viable for us.
Every city is using this stuff. And so just like we kind of pull together and have similar insurance pools, we should pull together and have an IT pool and support non-proprietary options for how we run our governments. And I think that creates a larger social benefit. So I'm going to vote no, not because I think this is going to not pass if I vote no, but because I want to continue this conversation, and that's my motivation.
Any other discussion? All right, and the only reason I'm going to support yes is because I know we haven't looked at it, but we really, like I said, I think it's imperative that we take a look at this. So, all right, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
All right, so it's 5-1. So we are now to council reports, and we've got 7 minutes before we get to the end. So
Council member Jim Moran's services are noon Saturday at the Senior Center.
Full board met on Monday and approved the 2020 budget.
We had a admin and finance committee meeting at Clown Transit and talked about potential impacts to the passing of 976, and we'll have a presentation to the full board tomorrow at our meeting. And I guess the upside is we don't need to panic. The downside is it will eventually have some potential impacts if the funding isn't replaced in some way. So.
2 weeks of council report, because we didn't do it last time. So just tagging onto that, at the Peninsula Regional Transportation Planning Organization executive board meeting, there was a lot of discussion about the impact of I-976. Basically, you know, it's a bad situation and the challenge, I think, is the way the state does its budget. It's unclear exactly how it's all going to impact. One kind of anecdote that Washington State Ferries had thrown out at a meeting that some other people in the PRTPO were in was the amount of budget that Washington State Ferries has to cut is equivalent to completely cutting San Juan Island to Canada, the port towns in Coupeville, and the Vashon Island to Seattle. Like, that amount of run cuts is what's needed. Now, that's not meaning that they're proposing cutting those runs completely, but that is the magnitude of run cuts that Washington State Ferries has to go through. For Clown Transit, we're not looking, I don't think we're seriously looking at increasing service at this point, yet we were on track to adding a midday straight shot. You know, there's some other funding options there, but I mean, that's a larger conversation. So, yeah, pretty, it's kind of like, you know, watching triage mode, being in that meeting at that point. So I would like to thank the voters of Port Angeles for passing the affordable housing sales tax. I was not sure what the result would be, and it seems like it's pretty solid yes for that. And those funds are going to combine with the state sales tax credit funds, which are now going to be doubled because we have a qualifying local tax. And that's going to be a lot of extra money going to solving some of the real roots of homelessness in our community. So I think that was a fantastic decision by our city. I want to thank everyone who ran in the election or is still running in the election. And I hope that candidates attend, or council members elect, I'm not really sure what the status is at this point, attend the Association of Washington Cities Essentials workshop. It's really valuable on some of the basic things of the Public News Act, Public Records Act, ethics stuff. So that's fantastic. And Association of Washington Cities is kind of like the hidden gem that you don't know exists until you become a council member elect. So please dig that up. I want to follow up from our conversation at our last meeting about some of the zoning, and there was something that some of the developers brought up about development fees. This is specific to Port Angeles Municipal Code 13-68 or .68.030 and 13.68.040, and that's an outstanding issue that we should address probably in the new year. But I don't want to lose track of those comments about development fees. I also want to note the email from Christy Wojnowski that came to all the council on November 2nd, talking about the availability of after-school programs in the city. That's a really important issue. It sounds like there's support from the schools and our state legislators in response to what's going on there. I really think it's important for the city to be an active partner in ensuring quality after-school programs, childcare, and preschool for kids in Port Angeles. It's part of our health, safety, and general welfare, as we talked about before. It's foundational to what we do moving forward. Thanks for the discussion on ranked choice voting. I was going to mention that I did drink wines and vote on them back on election night, but we're way past that now. The Straight Ecosystem Recovery Network, Steering group met last week. I'm not going to be available for the full Straight Ecosystem Recovery Network meeting that is on Friday, December 6th. Jim was the alternate for this, so I'd like to see if another council member is available. I guess informally, even a council member elect could attend, but probably not formally. It's a Friday, December 6th. It's at the Jamestown Red Cedar Hall. It's a long one, 9:30 to 2:30 meeting, but there's good desserts and lunch. I also, looking up and double checking that Jim was my alternate for that, I saw that I'm the alternate for Jim for the North Olympic Peninsula Resource Conservation and Development Council. And I don't know when their next meeting is, but I might not be available for it. So I'd like to make sure that we cover that as well. Yeah, so that is it. Thank you.
So yesterday I attended a Chamber of Commerce meeting. We have a Future Emerging Opportunities Committee where we talk about big picture stuff and long-term strategy. And just to let the council know, we discussed, the Port Angeles Renaissance is usually the main topic. And they're continuing to plan those meetings and having those, things. I think that they're going to ask city staff for some updates at the next meeting. And the really great, interesting thing that they were talking about is trying to, propose and develop a kind of a 5-year strategic plan for downtown as we're seeing all these changes coming. And so that's something they might bring to council in the future, that proposal. So I'm really excited about it. I did not attend the last OPTC meeting. I believe Allison called in. I honestly don't know what was on their agenda, but I did get an email from, I lost it, regarding one of the things that's happening in regional tourism is the Washington Tourism Alliance is starting to really gear up where they're doing statewide tourism. And so there was a pitch that was delivered by the Washington Tourism Alliance. They had a video on King 5 and then an article on their website as well about Washington port cities, and they talked about Port Angeles and Port Townsend both. That was a really cool thing. So we're seeing statewide tourism marketing happening at a larger level. It's really exciting. And then I attended the homelessness task force. That was since we didn't do council reports last time, that happened the same day as our council meeting, and the approval of our new 5-year plan to end homelessness is being sent to the county commissioners for final approval. But we had a lot of really robust discussion, specifically around who is going to be building the housing. And so Sherry Tinker has sent us all a really passionate email about that and trying to get kind of some fires lit. And so there are a lot of leaders around our county that are taking that responsibility very seriously, and as we as a city now are going to in the future be having more funds, so it's a great time for us to engage those leaders in the community that are in the trenches. So those conversations are being had. I was going to read some of Sherry's email, but we're past time. But I'm really excited for her, building housing for veterans in Forks. She's moving with a plan next year to build more housing at Sargent's Place. So there are some really great people doing some really great work.
That's great. So council, we've hit 10 o'clock. I guess we need a motion to extend this probably just another 10 minutes so that we get a chance to get the second public comment in, and as well as...
Madam Mayor, point of order, we normally don't do a public comment past 10 o'clock. We do it by 9:45, and our staff has been here since early morning, so it's really not fair to continue the meeting.
All right, so, we still have my comments and the city managers. So do we want to extend
5 minutes?
Sure. Yeah, I move to extend 10 minutes.
I'll second 10.
Which one are we seconding, 5 or 10?
All right, so we have a motion for 10. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. And all those opposed?
No.
All right, so it looks like it's 42. All right, so extending attendance. So I attended the Column MRC meeting, and this was a meeting, I guess, Nathan, you used to attend at some point. And I know that they are, and I know we had the discussion as to how many committees do we need to go, and should staff be attending this one instead of council or not. One of the things that they thought they might work is, do we want to get a volunteer from the committee, from the community, who might want to attend in our stead, and have them come report to council, after each meeting. That would be one way that we could potentially get to this, a lot of the committee work that's pretty onerous for us. Anyway, in March 14th at the Burton, you're going to have a celebration of science. There was a retreat for this one. The top 4 areas were climate change, the marine toxics and plastics, fossil fuel transport, and shoreline development. The next meeting is going to be December 16th. It's open to the public at H2O. There is also a Friday, there's a webinar for linear cleanup, so you need to register if you want to go to that. And then this coming Earth Day is going to be 50 years, so the committee urged that we all start thinking what do we want to do for the 50th celebration of Earth Day. And that is the end of my report.
Madam Mayor and Council, I did want to reiterate again the celebration of life for Jim Moran at 12 p.m. Saturday, November 23rd at the Senior Center with a reception to follow, location to be announced. So they will likely announce that location for the reception to follow at the ceremony. In addition to that, I wanted to remind Council that we have a Port Angeles Municipal Code work session next Tuesday from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. To discuss and follow through with Council direction on moving forward or the potential to move forward with larger changes to the Port Angeles Municipal Code.
I would like to be excused from the next Tuesday's meeting. I've been invited to the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade events, and so I'll be out of town.
And that meeting is from 5 to
5 p.m. to 7 p.m.
All right, and so we are, as we do not have time for the public comment, but I guess we said till 10:10, so if you...
Great, thank you. A while ago when I was talking about Papa, I failed to give you the really important things that are going to be important to you. And one of those is the things I thought about tonight.
Dale, I'm sorry, you're not at the mic.
Is there a microphone?
It's just working. Good. I failed to give you the information that is really going to be of interest to you. You know, the video that, when we were, I think we were suing the federal government about this old water system out there, and I don't know if you know it or not, but Papa personnel put together a videotape which erstwhile city manager McKean took to Washington, showed it to some of the staff people, slam dunk. It was done with. Thanks to Papa, with Papa personnel at least. We did a video on the Dungeness Lighthouse, and it had been on the air for 24 hours when we were getting calls from New Jersey, a public access station saying, can we show this out here? That's tourism, folks. They needed a video to describe the off-channel reservoir over at the Dungeness River near Sweden, and bang, that was Papa, wasn't Papa production, but it was Papa personnel again doing that. You may remember they wanted to change the style of city government. Well, they called Papa in to do a series of public service ads entitled Port Angeles is Working for You. Talked about all the great things that have been done in the last few years, and the vote to change the city government failed miserably. Right now, we're showing programs on emergency management for this Cascadia Uprising. You know, I hope it doesn't happen in my lifetime. I hope it doesn't happen in any of your lifetimes, but it's going to happen. And we're getting people prepared for it, or helping people get prepared for it on a daily basis. We're going to show that video until it wears out. Any of you have the good fortune to sit and listen to Mr. Duncan's storytelling over the years? We've captured hours of him seated among children as they sit in rapture at his storytelling. I don't know how much longer he's going to be around, but we've got him on video for perpetuity. You know, we've got Washington geology lectures that come on at least twice a week. Did I mention we had been nominated for 2 Emmy Awards the first 2 years that we were in broadcast? Did I mention that video of the Dungeness Lighthouse won Best of the Northwest in 2 different categories? Folks, we're putting heads in beds. We're helping the city out of lawsuits. We're helping people describe what an off-channel reservoir is. We've been working awfully hard for you. Right now, we've got a $30,000, hopefully a $30,000 income from the PEG fees. Well, what happened was we got 20% of what the city got. Now, the city's already balanced its budget. Let's flip that over and put Papa in for that 80% and let the city try to manage on that $30,000 a year. We need your help, folks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Last 2 minutes. No? All right. Well, seeing no one else, we are adjourned. Good night, folks. Thank you for your work.